In the center of the academy arena, the tension is palpable as the two students face off. The blonde noble sneers at his opponent, questioning how a mere commoner could ever hope to defeat him. He declares that the outcome is already decided, mocking the dark-haired youth's resolve and claiming that the flag of defeat is already waving over him. As the signal to begin the duel echoes through the grounds, he lunges forward with arrogant confidence. He calls out to his maid, Lilith, demanding she watch closely as he humiliates the fool who dared to defy him, certain that his superior status will guarantee a swift victory. However, the outcome is not what he predicted. Moments later, he lies face down in the dirt, utterly defeated. Lilith cries out in shock as the commoner stands over his fallen rival, the crowd watching in stunned silence as the invincible noble is brought low. This is the fall of the man known throughout the land as the villainous noble. His name is Weiss Vincent, and his defeat marks the beginning of a downward spiral into infamy, his face twisted in a mask of rage and disbelief. In a world far removed from these events, a different soul watches the tragedy conclude on a glowing screen. He reflects on Weiss's scripted end. How, after losing to the hero Alan, the noble lost everything and was eventually discarded as a mere shield by the Demon King, a pathetic end for a once proud antagonist. His heart suddenly falters, and he collapses in his chair. The controller clatters to the floor as his life slips away, the game's final credits still rolling in the background of his quiet room. The Grand Vincent estate stands silent under the afternoon sun, its imposing architecture a testament to the family's power and the rigid social order they uphold. Inside its cold stone walls, a young maid leans against the corridor, her face flushed and breath hitching in distress. She seems overwhelmed, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion as she tries to compose herself. She is cornered by the young master, who stands over her with a cold, commanding presence. He holds a riding crop behind his back, his shadow looming large over her trembling form as he traps her against the wall. He looks down at her with a sharp, predatory glint in his eyes, a faint, mocking smile playing on his lips that suggests he is savoring her discomfort. He blinked, his eyes widening in sudden, jarring clarity as the world around him shifted and sharpened into focus. Before him, a young woman lay bound on the cold floor, her posture forced and vulnerable, while he stood frozen in a state of absolute disbelief. The confusion deepened, leaving him breathless as he struggled to comprehend the impossible scene unfolding in front of his very eyes. She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears and a profound lack of recognition, her voice trembling as she questioned where she was and who he could possibly be. Startled by a strange weight in his hand, he looked down to find himself clutching a whip, a realization that sent a jolt of pure panic through his chest. His mind raced, recalling the moments just before when he was merely a player in a digital world. Yet now the reality of the bound woman and the ornate room was undeniably physical. Despite the chaos, he couldn't help but notice her striking beauty, even as she addressed him with a title of respect, her voice laced with concern for his sudden change in demeanor. Turning toward a nearby mirror, he caught sight of a reflection that was both familiar and alien, the name Weiss echoing in his mind with a haunting sense of déjà vu. A horrific epiphany struck him like a physical blow. He had been reborn as the very monster he had once watched on a screen. The cruel and abusive noble, Weiss Vincent. There was no room for doubt. He was now a living part of the school game, Noblesse Oblige, trapped in the skin of its most hated antagonist. He recalls the cover of Noblesse Oblige, the school fantasy game he had mastered through countless playthroughs. In this world, he is now Weiss Vincent, the villainous noble destined to be the primary obstacle for the hero, Alan. This version of himself was a monster, a man who took sadistic pleasure in using his power to relentlessly torment those weaker than him. He was destined for a cruel path. After a crushing defeat at Alan's hands, Weiss would lose his status and eventually fall so low as to become a mere servant to the Demon King. His ultimate fate was even more pathetic, ending as a discarded human shield, left to rot on the cold ground. Looking at the trembling girl before him, he realizes she is Lilith Scarlet, the very maid the original Weiss was known to abuse. He recalls the dark history of the noble's cruel hobby, a history of violence that makes his stomach churn. He is overcome with a wave of self-loathing, unable to fathom how anyone could be such a despicable, heartless bastard. His first instinct is to reach out and immediately free her from her bonds, unwilling to let such a gentle soul suffer any longer. However, he hesitates, realizing that a sudden shift from cruelty to kindness might trigger suspicion in a world that expects him to be a villain. He stands over the slumped form of the maid, his conscience warring with his desire to maintain his villainous facade. Though he considers ending the session there, the sight of her broken state makes it impossible for him to simply walk away. As he leans in closer, his eyes widen in shock at the sight of her neck, where the marks of his previous cruelty are laid bare. Seeing her tremble so violently, he looks down at his own hands, wondering if he should attempt a gamble that could change everything. With a sudden, determined shout, he thrusts his hands forward, and a brilliant light erupts from his palms as he invokes a healing spell. The magical energy washes over her, and a faint hiss of steam rises from her skin as the bruises and wounds begin to vanish. He recalls the hidden knowledge from a strategy guide, remembering that the developers had secretly given his character the ability to use healing magic from the very start. Quickly masking his concern with a haughty tone, he tells her not to misunderstand his actions, claiming he was merely using her as a subject to practice his magic. Despite his cold words, she looks up at him with eyes brimming with tears of genuine gratitude, her voice trembling as she thanks him. He watches her, unsettled by how easily she offers her thanks, and he begins to realize the true depth of the fear and obedience the original Weiss had instilled in her. A heavy silence falls between them as he looks away, his heart heavy with the weight of a name he is only just beginning to truly understand. He lowers his gaze, the weight of his past actions heavy in his voice as he offers a sincere apology, promising that his previous cruelty has come to an end. Outside, the morning sun hits the Vincent estate, while inside, Lilith stands frozen, her wide eyes reflecting a profound sense of bewilderment at this sudden change in her master. Later, in the opulence of the dining hall, the household staff gathers as a meal is prepared, the air thick with a tension that has become the norm in this house. As Zed's Alvin approaches to serve the dish, he braces himself for the usual outburst, remembering how often plates were dashed to the floor in fits of noble rage, yet he remains professional as he presents the meal. The young noble stares down at the food, a quiet realization dawning on him about how carelessly he had treated such things in the past, acknowledging to himself that his previous path was a mistake. He looks up at the butler and offers a rare compliment, noting that the seasoning of the meal is once again perfect, a simple statement that carries immense weight. The veteran servant is momentarily speechless, his lips trembling as the unexpected praise from his master sinks in. Overwhelmed by the sudden validation, the butler erupts with a display of intense gratitude, declaring himself deeply honored by such gracious words while the rest of the staff looks on in awe. The entire domestic crew is moved to tears by the display of character, whispering of their master's newfound wonder, while he sits in awkward silence, baffled that a simple compliment could cause such a stir. Looking at the weeping servants, he realizes they have interpreted his change as a sign of maturity, never suspecting that the soul within the body is no longer the one they once feared. He reflects on the sheer weight of his predecessor's cruelty as the staff continues to weep around him, realizing just how monstrous the original inhabitant of this body must have been. Determined to never cause such sorrow again, he picks up a slender training rod, deciding that his first step toward redemption is to discard the tools of his former violent self. Stepping out into the crisp air of the estate grounds, he grips the rod tightly, his resolve hardening into a silent vow to transform himself completely. He looks toward the horizon where the looming silhouette of the prestigious academy stands, a reminder of the ticking clock. As a noble, he is expected to enroll in 2 years' time, a milestone that will define his future. He is haunted by a vision of a darker timeline where his reputation crumbled into dust following a humiliating defeat at the hands of a hero during a combat trial. He realizes that in that alternate reality, the clash of blades with his rival would have been the catalyst for his descent, but by changing his actions now, the once-fixed future is beginning to shift. He looks down at the shattered remains of a wooden sword lying forgotten amidst the rubble, a physical manifestation of the path he is desperately trying to break away from. With a gaze full of unwavering conviction, he declares to the open sky that he will expend every ounce of his being to steer clear of the ruin that once awaited him. He feels sweat pouring down his face, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he pushes his physical limits in a grueling training session. Slumped over a tree stump to catch his breath, he is startled when a familiar voice calls out his name from across the clearing. The S-rank adventurer, Milk Avitas, looms over her student with a sharp, questioning look, wondering if he is truly committed to the task. Below, Weiss Vincent is a picture of total collapse, his limbs shaking as he gasps for breath and begs for a momentary reprieve. She acknowledges his state with a curt nod, granting him a brief window to recover his strength. Her gaze narrows into a cold, piercing stare as she warns him that if he intends to be labeled a failure the moment he enters the academy, he should simply maintain his current pathetic display. Under her relentless pressure, he forces his aching body back into motion, clumsily wielding dual swords while she barks corrections at his stance and grip. He can't help but reflect on the irony of using his family's prestige to hire such a legendary master, only to find himself in a living nightmare. He is contending with a legend, a warrior who typically only graces the battlefield during the most dire of circumstances and is hailed as the peerless blade of the royal capital. Her mouth twists into a chilling, sadistic grin as she observes his suffering, making him realize too late that his request for merciless training has been answered by a woman who truly enjoys the art of breaking others. Weiss accepts a gift from Lilith, a headband inscribed with the word for diligence. He ties it around his brow, his gaze hardening with a resolve so fierce, he declares he will push himself to the very brink of death. This intensity stems from his knowledge of noblesse oblige, a world he views as a high-difficulty game where failure is final. He recalls the image of a fallen warrior, a reminder that in this reality, one must play perfectly to survive. Because of this looming threat, he forces his trembling legs to hold their ground. He admits to himself that he has never truly conditioned his body, not even in his previous life, but he cannot afford to waste a single second when the price of negligence is expulsion or a cold grave. As he pushes through the pain, his focus narrows to the singular goal of self-improvement. He understands that a strong physical foundation is the only way to master the complexities of swordsmanship and magic, even if the process leaves him utterly spent. He begins each morning by meticulously practicing his sword forms under the watchful, silent gaze of his instructor. Following the technical drills, he transitions into a grueling regimen of strength training and endurance running. The physical toll is immense, but he refuses to slow his pace. From dawn until the stars claim the sky, he repeats the cycle, swinging, sprinting, and straining. It is a relentless loop of exertion designed to break and rebuild him. To fuel this transformation, he adheres to a strict, protein-rich diet. A spread of carefully prepared dishes sits ready, each ingredient chosen to repair his taxed muscles. 2 weeks into this punishing routine, he sits with his loyal butler, reflecting on the progress made. While magic can mend his flesh, he knows it cannot replace the grit earned through sweat, and he offers a humble apology for the extra work his ambition has caused. The elder man meets his gaze with unwavering respect, assuring him that any burden is lightened by the young master's own dedication. He watched as the young master reached a breaking point, 3 weeks into a training regimen that had carved exhaustion into every line of Weiss's face. He felt the weight of those 3 weeks, as the days had blurred into a hellish cycle where every single hour felt like an eternity spent under the sun's unforgiving gaze. Before he could even process the passage of time, the sun would dip below the horizon, marking the end of another day of relentless physical labor. Having finally acclimated to the brutal physical regimen, the young noble stood before his loyal attendants and declared his readiness to begin his magical education. As they approached the study, he confessed to his butler that he was weary of the harshness he'd endured and hoped for a teacher with a gentler touch. He watched with bated breath as a mysterious figure entered the room and set a pointed hat upon the table, wondering who had been summoned to guide him. His heart sank into his stomach when the newcomer revealed herself to be none other than the formidable Milk Avitas, prompting a cry of pure despair. She looked down at him with a cool, piercing gaze, explaining that her expertise was not limited to the blade. She was a master of the arcane arts as well. She watched as he turned to his butler in a panic, demanding to know why a kinder soul hadn't been chosen, while the old man simply reminded him of her unparalleled genius. Sensing his hesitation, she leaned in with a terrifyingly intense expression, mockingly offering to be gentle with him, a promise that only served to deepen his dread. She stands on the riverbank, her voice cutting through the roar of the waterfall as she commands her student to channel more magic power and keep his eyes open. Weiss, drenched and trembling under the crushing weight of the water, lets out a guttural scream of agony. She remains unmoved by his desperate pleas for mercy and his complaints that this is far more grueling than sword training, coldly ordering him to endure the torrent for another 2 hours. He can only wail in despair, wondering where her compassion has gone. She explains with cold logic that mana is the lifeblood of magic, and the only way to expand one's capacity is through this relentless, consistent training. The ultimatum is clear. He must repeat this grueling cycle every single day until he loses consciousness. The sheer impossibility of the task leaves him shell-shocked before he finally collapses into the shallow water, utterly spent. This brutal regime marks only the beginning, as his days are now split between the waterfall and practical combat drills with wooden swords. During their duel, he is repeatedly struck down, his movements sluggish and full of openings that she exploits without hesitation. When he finally hits the limit of his physical endurance and falls to the grass, a familiar, gentle presence arrives to offer relief. She promises to support him with her healing magic, encouraging him to do his best, while their instructor merely scoffs, viewing his resilience as nothing more than an opportunity for further punishment. As he catches his breath, a strange thought begins to take root in his mind, distracting him from the lingering ache in his muscles. He finds himself pushing his body to the absolute limit, running and striking with a fervor he never knew he possessed. He is haunted by a single question: why is someone who was once so defined by laziness now working with such desperate, unyielding intensity? He reflects on the hollow existence of his previous life, remembering a time when he was little more than a shell, surrounded by the clutter of a shut-in, and fleeing from every challenge that required effort. Looking out over the sprawling grounds of the estate where he now trains, he questions the fundamental shift in his nature, wondering why he is now capable of such relentless and diligent effort compared to his past self. 2 months of grueling labor have passed, and the constant roar of the waterfall has become the backdrop to his daily struggle for physical and magical mastery. As he rests from the exertion, a sudden, gentle weight settles on his head, causing him to look up in startled confusion at his mentor. She offers a rare, soft smile, commending him for his rapid progress and the efficiency with which he met his latest objective in a mere 2 hours. The unexpected tenderness leaves him reeling, as he tries to reconcile this affectionate gesture with the brutal training he has endured under her watch. Confirming his suspicions, she explains that this physical praise is his designated reward for every milestone he successfully reaches during their sessions. He can't help but feel a sense of irony, privately noting that the meager reward of the head pat hardly balances the overwhelming severity of her stick approach. His silent critique is met with a knowing, slightly ominous look from his teacher, just as a familiar presence approaches from the distance to interrupt the moment. Lilith arrives with a bright expression, carrying a picnic basket and announcing that she has brought lunch, offering a much-needed reprieve from the morning's intensity. She stands quietly as the teacher continues her lecture, her expression sharp and knowing. Milk acknowledges that while others might offer him rewards and kindness, her own role is to be the disciplinarian, the one who drives him forward with a firm hand. As she speaks, the young maid stands nearby, holding the wooden lunchboxes that represent that very support. The teacher reminds him never to overlook those who provide the carrot, for their quiet encouragement is what enables him to endure the rigors of his training. The realization strikes him with sudden clarity. While the maid tilts her head in silent confusion at the heavy atmosphere, his gaze sharpens, seeing the intricate web of relationships that have sustained him. Standing together by the rushing river, the weight of his progress finally settles in. He understands now that his ability to persevere isn't a solitary feat. It is a collective effort fueled by the people surrounding him. His mind wanders to the faces of his household. He thinks of his stoic butler who ensures he is well fed, and the gentle maid who has remained a constant, supportive presence by his side through every trial. Then, his focus returns to the formidable woman before him. He recognizes that her harshness is a form of care, a necessary pressure intended to forge his spirit and ensure his growth as a mage and a man. A small, genuine smile touches his lips, though his eyes remain shadowed by the gravity of his thoughts. Without this unexpected cooperation from those around him, he knows he would have remained stagnant, unable to reach these new heights. This sense of gratitude stands in stark contrast to the shadows of his past. He recalls the versions of himself that came before, both the original noble and the soul from another life, who lived in isolation, driven only by their own selfish desires. He remembers the cold loneliness of a life where no one reached out to help, and, just as importantly, no one cared enough to scold him for his failures. It was a hollow existence, devoid of the friction that creates character. Closing his eyes, he finally identifies the missing piece of his former lives. What he truly required was this delicate balance he found here, a mixture of love that is both sweet in its kindness and harsh in its expectations. He makes a silent, internal vow that his days of purely selfish survival are over, declaring that he will no longer live only for his own sake. Reflecting on his past motivations, he acknowledges that while avoiding death and ruin was his primary focus, his perspective has shifted toward those who have supported him, like Lilith, whom he no longer wishes to sack. Standing with renewed purpose alongside his allies, he declares his intent to steer clear of the ruinous fate that once awaited him, choosing a path that benefits both himself and everyone who stands by him. He gasps for air, his face drenched in sweat as the moon hangs high over the estate, marking the late hour of his relentless and grueling practice. His struggle continues despite the immense physical toll, driven forward by the booming voice of his mentor who demands another 4 hours of effort, pushing him to his absolute limits. The group arrives at the bustling League Belt town, a place of significance in the world Weiss once knew as a game. He walks between Milk and Lilith, feeling the weight of the situation as they cross the stone bridge into the heart of the settlement. This town serves as the starting point for many journeys, its streets lined with timber-framed houses and filled with the sounds of daily commerce. For Weiss, it is a surreal realization to stand in the very location where the story's original protagonist was meant to begin his quest. He can't help but feel a bead of sweat roll down his temple as the chaotic energy of the town presses in on him. Nearby, the sounds of a heated dispute erupt, with someone shouting accusations of cheating, further heightening his unease. Turning to his mentor, he remarks on the poor state of security in the area, watching as a brawl breaks out just a few paces away. Milk remains unbothered by the violence, her gaze fixed forward as the sounds of aggression echo through the alleyways. With a serious expression, the young noble asks the question that has been weighing on his mind. Who exactly is he meant to face in this practical test? He searches Milk's face for a hint, his own features set in a mask of focused determination. He reflects on the 3 months of grueling training he has endured since his journey began, realizing that this city was chosen specifically for his evaluation. He wonders if his opponent will be a common criminal or someone more formidable, questioning the nature of the combat that awaits him. In response, she offers a sharp, predatory smile that sends a jolt of alarm through him. Her eyes gleam with a mischievous intent, suggesting that whatever she has planned for his test will be far from ordinary. While Lilith cheers enthusiastically for his success, he finds himself trembling with a growing sense of dread. Milk assures him not to worry, her voice dripping with a dark confidence as she promises to select the absolute best opponent for his trial. Unbeknownst to them, a group of rough-looking men has already taken notice of their arrival from a nearby vantage point. The leader of the local thugs grins maliciously, his eyes narrowing as he singles out the group for his next target. The thugs begin to leer at the women, their comments turning crude as they discuss their preferences. They view the newcomers not as threats, but as prey, completely unaware of the martial prowess possessed by the noble and his companions. The ruffians sneered at the young noble, mocking him for bringing such a beauty into their rough territory. Their laughter was cut short, however, when their target's companion issued a chilling warning. If they didn't watch their tongues, the boy they were belittling would be the end of them. He narrowed his eyes, ignoring the lingering chuckles of the gang behind him. To him, this town was nothing more than a den of thugs, a place where the worst of society gathered to prey on the unwary. She voiced her irritation at the persistent harassment, her brow furrowed in distaste. Beside her, the young man steeled his resolve, silently vowing that regardless of their teacher's presence, he would protect his companion from these pests at any cost. The teacher advised them to simply pay the group no mind, dismissing the thugs as a waste of their valuable time. While the others seemed to relax, the boy felt a sudden, inexplicable jolt of surprise, his senses tingling as if he had missed something vital. She nodded in cheerful agreement with the instructor's words, her earlier annoyance seemingly vanished behind a bright smile. He remained quiet, however, unable to reconcile her current sunny disposition with the strange sensation he had just experienced. He couldn't shake a chilling realization as they approached a large, timber-framed building. For a fleeting second, he had felt a wave of pure, unadulterated killing intent radiating from the girl beside him. He wondered if it had merely been a trick of his imagination, as she now appeared perfectly calm and innocent. They stepped into the Adventurers Guild, a spacious hall filled with heavy wooden tables and the quiet murmur of a few early patrons. The high ceilings and sturdy architecture spoke of a place built for business and the occasional brawl. The atmosphere inside was thick with the scent of old wood and spirits as they approached the long service counter. A few hooded figures lingered in the shadows of the bar, their presence adding to the town's reputation for harboring dangerous individuals. The trio of troublemakers followed them inside, their expressions hardening into masks of pure aggression. They were no longer laughing. Instead, they looked ready to prove that their earlier threats were more than just empty words. They surrounded the young noble, their leader looming over him with a menacing command to take their dispute outside. The confrontation had escalated quickly, leaving the boy trapped between the guild's tables and the looming threat of physical violence. He and his rough associates are identified as the Boudin brothers, the very opponents Weiss is destined to confront. Because of their long history of crime, including robbery and kidnapping, Milk explains that they were only protected by bribes until their recent arrest, making them the perfect test for a first real battle. She urges him to listen closely as the criminals loiter nearby, completely unaware that they are being evaluated as training fodder. Her sharp eyes acknowledge his resolve, yet she notes his total lack of experience, a dangerous combination in the world of adventurers. This lack of experience makes real combat a necessary, albeit dangerous, step in his growth that he must eventually take. She continues her grim lecture, warning that many die in their first encounter when left to face it alone, and she won't always be there to watch over him. Despite the dire warning, she promises to step in if things become life-threatening, offering him a sense of security that bolsters his confidence. That security vanishes in an instant when he realizes he has been left entirely alone in the street, his companions having disappeared without a word. The thugs take advantage of his isolation, beckoning him toward a dark alley while he realizes his teacher has ruthlessly tricked him into this fight. Faced with this sudden trial, he steels his nerves, refusing to let fear dictate his actions as he prepares to face the brothers alone. He set his sights on a singular, grim objective, to sever one of their limbs as a means of incapacitating them without resorting to lethal force. Observing the trio from behind, he acknowledged that despite their rough appearance, they possessed genuine skill. Facing 3 opponents at once was a daunting prospect, and while he had no desire to take their lives, he questioned if he could even secure a victory in a fair fight. As the group led him deeper into the narrow confines of the alleyway, he realized the confrontation was inevitable. He desperately needed a strategy before the first blow was struck, knowing that once the fight began, there would be no turning back. His mind drifted back to his mentor's parting words, her calm assurance that following her instructions would ensure his safety. Yet the cold sweat on his brow and his wide, uncertain eyes betrayed his lingering doubt. Stepping into the shadows of the buildings, he focused on the lessons he had been taught, trying to steady his resolve as he followed the thugs toward their destination. High above the street, Milk watched the boys' progress through a window, accompanied by a young woman with her hair tied back in a high ponytail who watched the scene with concern. The companion chided the teacher, calling her cruel for misleading her student, but the mentor remained unmoved, arguing that such pressure was necessary to spark true motivation in the boy. Dismissing the concern with a long draft from her mug, the swordswoman muttered that she would intervene if things turned truly dire, though her companion remained unconvinced that this could still be considered a mere practice session. Meanwhile, in a crowded tavern, the young woman found herself the center of unwanted attention as a group of rowdy men recognized her from earlier in the day. They closed in on her, leering at her beauty and celebrating their perceived good fortune, while she looked on with a stoic, unimpressed gaze that suggested she was far from helpless. She sits frozen as the group of men looms over her, their leader boasting that they're the band of thieves who run the area. She listens in terror as they explain they were simply short on female company for the evening, the leader leaning in with a predatory grin while she huddles among the other frightened captives. In response to the threat, her expression shifts. The fear in her eyes is replaced by a dark, hollow intensity that suggests a hidden, dangerous resolve. Suddenly, the air is filled with a violent spray of crimson as a swift, unseen strike tears through the silence. Meanwhile, in the narrow alleyway, the young noble stands his ground against the 2 brothers, their backs turned to the street as they prepare to engage. He watches as one of the thugs reaches out to initiate the confrontation, droplets of blood beginning to dance in the air as the first blow is struck. The man erupts in a guttural scream of pain as he is blindsided by Weiss's strike. A blow so fast, it leaves him reeling before he can even process the attack. He drops into a low, focused stance, his blade unsheathed and ready as he reminds himself of the necessity of moving first to seize the advantage. He recalls the harsh lessons of his training during a moment of solitary preparation, remembering how his mentor, Milk, emphasized that the first strike is paramount. She had taught him that catching an opponent off guard is the most important element of battle, as a surprise blow can surpass the strength of any standard attack. She had further illustrated this brutal reality by explaining that even the greatest masters are vulnerable. A martial artist will perish if their neck is snapped before they can react, and even a master of magic will fall if they are struck before they have the chance to manifest a protective barrier. She observed from a distance as the three brothers remained oblivious, their leader beginning to summarize their demands with a dismissive shrug. Before the leader could finish his thought, the young noble lunged forward, internalizing the lesson that victory belongs to the one who strikes before their opponent can even react. As his blade flashed through the air, he reflected on a lifetime of hesitation, realizing that he could no longer afford to delay the difficult choices that defined a man's path. He pressed the advantage, acknowledging the folly of his past belief that time alone would resolve his problems. Instead, he now understood that the future is forged in the split-second decisions of the present. With a surge of newfound resolve, he channeled his energy into a decisive strike, mentally casting aside the shadow of his former, lethargic self in a desperate bid for transformation. The impact sent the three thugs sprawling across the cobblestones, leaving him breathless and panting, but triumphant as he realized his gamble had actually succeeded. He began to walk away from the fallen man, calculating that his only path to victory had been this preemptive strike, knowing that a fair fight against three mana-enhanced opponents would have been his certain doom. His heavy breathing was the only sound in the alley until a familiar voice rang out from the shadows, offering a surprising commendation of full points for his performance. He looked up in shock to find his mentor standing nearby with her student, though her initial praise was quickly tempered by a more critical assessment of 70 points. While the younger girl enthusiastically doubled that score in her own mind, the seasoned warrior explained that a truly proactive approach would have involved a much more brutal and permanent resolution within the safety of the guild. She had left him with much to ponder, and as he rejoined his companions, the weight of the encounter showed in the beads of sweat on his brow. He called out to his teacher and the maid, his voice slightly strained as he tried to regain his composure. He offered a sheepish apology to the young woman waiting for him, who was visibly distressed by his sudden disappearance. She scolded him, her relief manifesting his frustration at being left behind in such a frightening situation, demanding to know why he had vanished so abruptly. She clasped her hands in gratitude for his safe return, but the moment of peace was short-lived. A dark, crimson droplet had stained the cuff of his white shirt, a silent testament to the violence that had just transpired in the shadows. The sharp-eyed maid immediately questioned the origin of the mark, her concern mounting as she pointed out the blood. He quickly brushed it off, insisting it was merely a trick of the light and her imagination, desperate to keep the grim details of the alleyway struggle a secret. While he attempted to maintain his facade of normalcy, the aftermath of his actions was unfolding elsewhere. In a dimly lit tavern, the captives who had been held by the criminal gang were finally safe, their faces a mix of shock and profound relief as they were tended to. They stood amidst a scene of total devastation, where over 20 members of the notorious band of thieves lay incapacitated across the floor. The authorities arrived to find the entire criminal enterprise dismantled in a single, decisive sweep, leaving the room filled with the groans of the defeated. News of the event traveled quickly to the quiet gardens of the academy. Reports indicated that while the bandits had been beaten into a state where they were physically unable to speak, the mysterious assailant had ensured there were no fatalities, showing a terrifying level of precision. She leaned back, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips as she reviewed the official account. The document explicitly credited the successful operation to the unexpected cooperation of a certain young noble, confirming her suspicions about his hidden capabilities. The seasoned warrior gazed out over the grounds, her intrigue deepening. The name Weiss Vincent carried a new weight now, and she couldn't help but acknowledge the hidden depths of the student she had previously underestimated, wondering what else he was capable of. Back at the family estate, a formal letter of gratitude accompanied by a substantial cash reward arrived for the young master. He looked at the documents with genuine confusion, seemingly unaware that his preemptive strike had been interpreted as a heroic dismantling of an entire criminal organization. A year and a half has passed since the grueling regimen began. Under the crushing weight of a waterfall, the young noble stands firm, his body radiating a newfound, overwhelming strength. In the early days, he would frequently collapse from mana exhaustion or simple physical fatigue, watched over by his relentless mentor, Milk, as he struggled to keep pace with her demands. But those days of weakness are gone, replaced by a sharp, unwavering focus in his eyes. He now manipulates the elements with ease, conjuring blasts of energy and ice that once seemed impossible, much to the silent approval of his teacher. Even in the quiet of his room at night, his senses remain sharp. He has developed the ability to detect presence through solid walls and can feel the steady, powerful flow of mana coursing through his veins. Later, during a formal meal, the young master is joined by his loyal staff. Zeds inquires about the progress of his magical studies, to which he responds with a confident, calm assurance that everything is proceeding well. Despite his outward confidence, he privately reflects on the difficulty of mastering the four fundamental elements: earth, wind, water, and fire, under Milk's notoriously harsh and demanding training methods. To demonstrate his progress, he effortlessly manifests all four elements simultaneously, a feat of balance and control that leaves even the stoic butler momentarily stunned by the display of raw power. He confides in Zeds that his teacher's intensity is truly demonic, noting that her training is far more terrifying than the threat posed by the bandits he had previously subdued. The butler offers a knowing perspective, suggesting that such extreme training is only necessary because the young man's latent talent is so far beyond the ordinary that it requires a master of Milk's caliber to refine it. He has surpassed all expectations, a feat that Zeds now details to the household staff. The butler explains that, fundamentally, magic is restricted to a single element per person, making the young master's progress truly anomalous. He notes that even for an elite S-rank adventurer like Milk, mastery is limited to only two elements. Yet, despite these established laws of nature, the boy has managed to break through the ceiling of common sense. He is struck by the sheer rarity of the talent, marveling at the fact that the young noble can wield all four elements simultaneously. It is a gift that places him in a category of his own among mages. He admits that in the past, the boy's carelessness and lack of focus suggested a very different future. However, the diligence shown over the last 18 months has allowed this latent, extraordinary power to finally blossom. He looks on with a sense of profound respect, acknowledging that the young master has truly become an admirable figure through his own hard work and perseverance. He remains in the quiet, grand hall for a moment longer, the weight of the boy's potential hanging in the air as he contemplates the path that lies ahead for the Vincent family. The boy's earlier struggles come to mind, a memory of a time when he was reduced to tears, begging for mercy from the relentless pressure of his training. It was a moment of pure vulnerability and fear. She stood over him then, her sharp gaze piercing through his facade. Milk had realized that he wasn't just struggling. He had been practicing magic in secret, hiding his true progress from her for reasons only he understood. She demanded to see the results of this clandestine training, ignoring his tearful protests. Her curiosity was piqued, and she would not be denied a glimpse into the secrets he had been keeping. He finally reveals the fruit of his labor under the moonlight, ripples of raw energy pulsing from his hands. The secret is out, and the true extent of his power begins to illuminate the darkness of the garden. Milk's eyes widen as she realizes the magnitude of the boy's talent. It wasn't just the four basic elements. He was wielding light and dark as well, a feat thought impossible for one so young. The young noble offers a small, almost sheepish smile, admitting that the technique is still a work in progress. When Milk questions his secrecy, he explains his desire to present only a finished masterpiece to those he respects. Standing before a swirling vortex of energy, he confesses he hasn't quite mastered the flow. Milk can hardly believe such power could be considered incomplete, her skepticism etched clearly on her face. With his audience gathered, he decides the time has come to push through to perfection. This is his own creation, a fusion of opposing forces, light and dark, brought together by his sheer will and focus. The air erupts with a blinding radiance as the two elements finally coalesce into a singular, terrifying power. Lilith and Milk can only watch in stunned silence as the culmination of 18 months of secret labor manifests before them. The moon eventually yields to the rising sun, marking the passage of time as the intense training session in the woods finally concludes. Under the bright morning sky, the grand estate hums with activity as guests and students gather for a formal occasion, the previous night's secrets hidden behind noble facades. Amidst the polite chatter of the crowd, a sudden, weary yawn breaks the decorum of the morning, betraying the exhaustion of a long night spent awake. Lilith quickly covers her mouth, her face flushing with embarrassment as she apologizes to her master. He looks at her with concern, wondering if the previous day's exertions or the lack of sleep has finally caught up with her. Looking back on that moment, he reflects on how that final push in the woods had been the turning point, marking the successful completion of his original magic. He has conceptualized a new form of magic, Dark Heal, which merges the contradictory forces of light and dark. This technique utilizes the restorative properties of healing light, alongside the debilitating dark haze of the dark element. Because of this duality, the spell acts as a double-edged sword on the battlefield, automatically mending the wounds of allies within its radius, while simultaneously inflicting a persistent curse upon any recognized enemies. Despite the successful completion of this complex formula, the physical toll is immense. He lies collapsed on the training grounds, gasping for air as the sheer mana consumption of the spell leaves him utterly drained. Seeing his state, Milk offers a blunt solution, declaring her intent to fetch some potent alcohol to snap him out of his stupor. He, however, remains focused on his limitations, realizing that his current mana capacity is still far from sufficient for such advanced magic. Before he can even respond, she vanishes in a blur of speed, leaving him standing alone in the wake of her sudden departure. The scene shifts to the grandeur of a formal evening gala, where he stands among the nobility. Amidst the crowd, His sharp eyes catch a glimpse of someone moving with the uncanny, fluid grace of a trained assassin. He scans the room, recalling whispers of clandestine guards protecting the Vincent lineage, but his thoughts are interrupted when a familiar voice calls out his name. Turning toward the sound, he finds himself face to face with a young woman of breathtaking beauty, her shimmering hair and piercing red eyes immediately recognizable. He breathes her name in disbelief. Countess Cynthia Violetta. She stands before him, the very embodiment of grace and the central figure of the destiny he is trying to navigate. With a knowing smile, she greets him, noting the long duration since their last encounter. She leans in with a playful yet sharp remark, noting his distressed expression and comparing his face to that of a crushed goblin. He can only stare back in silence, a cold sweat breaking across his brow as her overwhelming presence triggers a deep-seated instinct of self-preservation. This encounter triggers a wave of dread within him, a reminder that in the original tale of this world, he was a man despised by every soul he met. His hand begins to tremble uncontrollably as the weight of his predetermined role as a villain settles over him like a heavy shroud. Among all those who held him in contempt, she was the one whose hatred burned the brightest and most dangerously. Her silhouette looms in his mind, a dark and vengeful figure destined to be the primary architect of his eventual downfall. It was her hand that would eventually leave his body broken and riddled with wounds in the story's original conclusion. The memory of that gruesome fate, though not yet realized in this timeline, flashes before his eyes with terrifying, visceral clarity. Despite the looming threat she represents, she maintains a mask of noble grace, her smile as radiant as it is unsettling. He reminds himself that his presence here was a reluctant duty, a necessity of his standing within the Vincent family that he could not avoid. Looking out at the grand estate, he laments his decision to attend such a gathering of high society individuals. The chance meeting with her before their formal enrollment at the academy was a variable he never expected to face so early in his journey. He takes a steadying breath, clutching his head as he tries to regain his composure amidst the swirling anxiety. He reasons that since they have not yet entered the academy, he has not given her a reason to despise him in this new life. A fleeting image of his former self, wearing a confident and perhaps arrogant smirk, flickers through his mind. It is a ghost of the man he is trying so hard not to become, a memory of a personality that no longer fits the person he is now. His sudden internal struggle does not go unnoticed, as she watches him with a look of growing confusion and curiosity. He finds himself grasping at fading memories of the game's plot, wondering what exactly he is meant to be doing in this pivotal moment. Suddenly, the shadows themselves seem to strike as a dark figure lunges from the gloom with lethal intent. Before she can even cry out, a gloved hand clamps over her mouth and a cold blade is drawn, trapping her in a deadly embrace right before his eyes. She leans in, her voice a low, dangerous murmur as she reminds him that the past is not forgotten. Her eyes lock onto his, dredging up the memory of his previous arrogance when he used his status to demand her presence in his private quarters. The memory of that night flashes back vividly. She had fled the room in a panic, desperate to escape the reach of his entitled hands while he sat idly by, convinced his title granted him whatever he desired. Returning to the present, she stares him down with cold, unadulterated contempt, her lips curling as she spits out the words, labeling him nothing more than a piece of noble trash. He can only stand there, beads of sweat forming on his brow under the weight of her gaze. Around them, the gala's atmosphere thickens with the hushed, judgmental whispers of the other guests, who wonder how he could possibly have the audacity to show his face here when her hatred for him is common knowledge. In a sudden, jarring shift of behavior, he drops into a deep, formal bow, his voice steady as he offers a sincere and humble apology for his past transgressions. He remains doubled over in front of the entire assembly, ignoring the shocked murmurs of the crowd as he publicly takes full responsibility for his actions, admitting they were unworthy of his station. This display of contrition catches her off guard. While she knows forgiveness is a distant prospect, she finds herself unable to further berate someone who appears to be genuinely reflecting on their mistakes. She watches him, still bent low in a posture of absolute submission, and admits to herself that she never expected a man of his pride to ever lower his head before another person. As he slowly begins to straighten, he silently hopes that this public display of humility has done enough to soften her stance and perhaps delay the grim fate he knows is written for him. He reflects on his own complicated feelings, acknowledging that while he once admired her from afar in another life, his priority now must be a quiet and swift exit from the spotlight. He reflects on the fundamental divide between them, seeing Cynthia as a beacon of light while he remains shrouded in the darkness of his past reputation. He believes their paths are destined to remain separate, a stark contrast that cannot be bridged. With a heavy heart, he decides that withdrawal is his only option, fearing that any further interaction would only lead to disaster. He compares himself to a disgraced noble reaching for a sun that would surely burn him, much like the tragic heroes of old who flew too close to the heavens. Just as he prepares to turn away, a sudden touch stops him in his tracks. Cynthia reaches out, her hand firmly grasping his arm, forcing their eyes to meet in a moment of unexpected connection that defies his internal monologue. Nearby, Lilith watches the exchange with wide-eyed curiosity as the sounds of the gala continue around them. The formal atmosphere is punctuated by the calling of his name, drawing the attention of those nearby to the unfolding scene. Breaking the silence, she offers a surprising invitation, asking if he would honor her with a dance. Her expression is calm, but resolute, her grip on his arm remaining steady as she challenges the social boundaries he so recently lamented. He is left speechless, his face flushing with a mix of shock and confusion at her request. However, the moment of intimacy is shattered by Lilith's sudden, frantic warning, her voice cutting through the music to alert him to a danger lurking just out of sight. The afternoon sun bathes the garden gazebo where the two nobles sit. Cynthia breaks the silence, remarking on the pleasant weather as they share a quiet tea time. A heavy silence follows her observation, hanging over the estate. Weiss eventually offers a stiff agreement, noting the chirping of the birds to fill the void. While he maintains a polite facade, his mind is racing with a single, nagging question. Why has Cynthia come to his home? She, meanwhile, remains perfectly composed, savoring her tea. His thoughts drift back to the night it all began, a memory of a crowded ballroom. There, she had approached him with a soft request, asking if he would grant her a dance. It had been a chance encounter at a formal gala, an unexpected invitation from the woman known as the kingdom's main heroine. He found himself swept onto the dance floor, still processing the sudden turn of events. Returning to the present, she observes him closely, noting that he seems different than before. When he reacts with confusion, she reveals that she is well aware of the transformation he has undergone. He realizes then that his grueling daily training and preparations for the academy were not as secret as he had hoped. Rumors among the nobility had clearly reached her ears, painting a picture of his newfound dedication. The memory of the dance intensifies as she brings up a specific, darker subject. She questions how much he truly remembers about the events of that day, her gaze searching his. He falters, his composure slipping as the attempted assault incident flashes through his mind. Struggling for words, he manages only a strained confirmation, unsure of how to even begin an apology for what transpired. As they move together in the memory of the dance, the distance between them vanishes. She leans in, her presence overwhelming, leaving him caught in the gravity of her gaze and the weight of their shared history. He stands frozen as she leans in close, her breath warm against his skin. She whispers a pointed question, asking if he has truly forgotten the confession he once made to her, her eyes searching his for a reaction. Before he can find his voice, the music fades, and the ballroom erupts into polite applause, signaling the end of their dance. She pulls back with a knowing, playful look, leaving him breathless and bewildered in the middle of the floor as the moment of intimacy shatters. With a final, enigmatic farewell, she disappears into the crowd, leaving a lingering sense of longing in her wake. That moment marked a turning point for him. She had claimed a piece of his heart that day, though he knew their story was far from over. The memory shifts to the imposing figure of Ajito Vincent, a man whose stern gaze and cold demeanor command absolute authority. Flanked by his silent, suit-clad subordinates, the patriarch of the Vincent family remains a formidable shadow over his son's life. Back at the family estate, a formal missive arrives, bearing the unmistakable seal of the head of the house. The contents of the letter send him into a spiral of panic. A dinner party with the young countess has been arranged at his own home, and to his horror, her carriage is already pulling up to the gates before he can even prepare. This whirlwind of events leads directly back to the present moment, where the two sit together in the quiet sanctuary of a garden gazebo. The household staff stands ready in the background, ensuring the afternoon tea proceeds with the utmost decorum. Despite the serene setting, he cannot help but curse his father's interference, wondering what game the old man is playing by forcing this proximity. As he watches her enjoy her tea, a heavy realization weighs on him. In the original course of destiny, she was never meant for him, but for the hero, Alan. He reflects on the fact that he is an interloper in a story that was supposed to belong to another. He understands now that by allowing himself to grow closer to her, he is actively rewriting the future. If he can change her path, perhaps the tragic collisions with Alan can be avoided entirely, altering the fate of the world itself. He grits his teeth, sweat beading on his brow as the weight of his situation sinks in. If the future shifts too far from the path he knows, his knowledge of the destined history will become useless, leaving him blind to the dangers ahead. This fear stems from the delicate balance of the world's intended path. Even his victory over Alan in their duel could have unforeseen consequences. Taking the main heroine away from the intended protagonist would utterly shatter the narrative he is trying to navigate. As they sit together in the quiet garden, he realizes he must find a way to maintain a perfect distance, neither too close to be loved nor too distant to be hated. It is a precarious tightrope walk where any slip could lead to a disastrous shift in fate. His internal calculations are suddenly interrupted by her soft voice, questioning if he has forgotten his own words. She reminds him of the time he claimed to have fallen in love with her at first sight, her gaze searching his for an answer. She recalls how his initial approach felt arrogant and sudden, leaving her dissatisfied, but his sincere apology changed her perspective. Seeing him bow so humbly had softened her heart in a way she hadn't expected. With a playful, blushing smile, she leans in and confesses that if he is truly sincere, she might not be opposed to his advances after all. The air between them grows heavy, with an unexpected intimacy that he never intended to spark. The two remain seated in the garden, the silence of the estate surrounding them, as the implications of her words hang in the air. He can barely contain his shock, his face contorting in a mix of panic and disbelief at her sudden change of heart. The internal alarm bells are screaming as his plan to stay at a distance crumbles before his eyes. Looking at her, he is struck by the contrast between her noble bearing and this newfound softness. He had worried about being disliked, but the prospect of her actually liking him is far more terrifying for the future he's trying to preserve. It occurs to him, then, that in the original tale, her affection for the protagonist developed with an almost abnormal speed. He realizes with a start that this trait hasn't changed. It has simply been redirected toward him. He contemplates the dangerous depth of her devotion. Once her heart is set, her loyalty becomes absolute. While her kindness is undeniable, it presents a significant hurdle to his goal of maintaining a safe distance from the main plot. As they sit together in the quiet garden, her soft laughter fills the air, prompting him to realize that he must find a way to dampen her growing interest before it spirals completely out of control. She leans closer, her eyes sparkling as she finds his stoic silence endearing, which only causes his internal panic to surge as he senses her affection climbing to new, unintended heights. The pressure becomes too much, and he lets out a startled, undignified yelp that echoes through the courtyard just as the maid arrives to refresh their tea. The sudden outburst leaves him looking utterly disheveled and panicked. Though mortified by his own outburst, he quickly wonders if such a pathetic display might actually serve his purpose by making him appear less appealing in her eyes. He thanks the maid for the refill, trying to regain some semblance of composure. While the maid quietly observes the strange dynamic, the young noblewoman remains completely unfazed, lost in her own world as she whispers about how charming his awkwardness truly is. He realizes with a sinking feeling that his plan to repel her has failed miserably. Later that day, at the Grand Vincent estate, the arrival of a carriage signals the start of a formal affair. A voice from within the manor questions if the young master has been informed of the day's significant matters by his father. Seated within the opulent halls, he sighs at the mention of an official engagement, only for his companion to reveal that she has already given her enthusiastic consent to the arrangement their parents proposed. She explains that after their conversation today, she was more than happy to agree. His father watches with a knowing smirk, dismissing his son's behavior as mere youthful trouble. Meanwhile, a rhythmic, sharp sound of metal striking wood emanates from the nearby trees, suggesting someone is training nearby. The elder Vincent continues to boast to his stoic attendants, claiming his son inherited both his good looks and a certain bashfulness that makes him difficult to read. The guards remain silent, their expressions unreadable as they stand by their lord. He continues to boast about his decisive action, wearing a self-satisfied smirk as he reflects on how he secured the engagement between his son and the renowned Lady Cynthia. To him, seeing them dance was all the confirmation he needed to finalize the arrangement without a moment's hesitation. Meanwhile, near the estate, the former thieves find themselves under the nobleman's thumb, tasked with a bizarre construction project. They laugh nervously, wondering if the young master is truly pleased with these developments, while their leader works diligently under the boss's watchful eye. The elder Vincent remains deeply involved, even assisting with the mundane details of the project while dismissing any complaints. He insists that, as a father, he possesses an innate ability to read his son's desires simply by looking at his face, a claim that leaves his subordinates visibly shaken. Back at the Grand Manor, the morning sun illuminates the stone facade as a carriage waits at the entrance. The air is still, but the quiet is about to be shattered by a sudden realization. Inside, the young noble's voice rings out in a frantic roar of disbelief, demanding an explanation for the sudden engagement. While he reels from the shock, the elegant Cynthia stands nearby, her expression unreadable but seemingly amused by the chaos. He frantically reviews the documents with his loyal maid, the truth finally sinking in. What he had initially dismissed as a simple social gathering was, in fact, a meticulously planned contract that bound his future to the Violetta family. As he processes the news, he begins to see his father's actions in a new, more complex light. While political marriages are the norm for their station, he realizes this wasn't a cold calculation for power, but a misguided attempt by the elder man to ensure his son's happiness. This revelation clashes with his memories of the world's history, where the man was a distant figure who rarely appeared. He struggles to reconcile the shadowy, absent father he expected with the overbearing presence currently appending his life. The man's true nature is laid bare as he showers his son with absurdly lavish gifts, from oversized confections to piles of precious gems. He is the very definition of an overindulgent parent, oblivious to the pressure his kindness exerts. Watching the carriage depart, the young man is struck by a chilling epiphany. He finally understands the catalyst for his predecessor's downfall. It wasn't neglect that forged a villain, but the suffocating, unchecked indulgence of a father who gave his son everything but boundaries. He stands frozen as the young maid approaches him, her head bowed and her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. Her expression is one of profound sorrow, a stark contrast to the usual quiet diligence she displays while serving the Vincent household. She begins to weep openly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she struggles to find her voice. Between choked sobs, She pleads with him to find happiness with the Countess, her words heavy with a self-sacrificing grief that seems to shatter her composure entirely. The distraught maid suddenly turns and bolts away with startling, unnatural speed. He watches in stunned silence, his mind racing to understand both her sudden emotional outburst and the incredible physical prowess she displayed in her desperate retreat. Weiss is startled as Milk Vitas sets a new, urgent objective for his training. He must chase after Lilith. She demands to know if he understands why the maid is in such distress, explaining that the girl who has supported him for 18 months feels cast aside by the sudden appearance of a noble fiancé. The teacher's gaze turns lethal as she delivers a final ultimatum. Either he brings Lilith back to the mansion, or he pays for his negligence with his life. He immediately bolts into a sprint, the weight of his debt to her finally sinking in as he realizes the profound shock the engagement news must have caused. As he tears through the estate grounds, he acknowledges that it was her unwavering support that pushed him to overcome his former, indolent self. The young noble reaches out, desperate to close the distance, but the girl flees with surprising speed, her voice cracking as she begs to be left in peace. They race past the cascading waterfall, her self-deprecating cries about being just a maid, echoing against his frantic pleas for a single moment of her time. Finally cornering her before the grand entrance of the manor, he roars that she is far more than a mere servant. She is someone truly precious to him. He clarifies that the engagement was a mandate from his father, not his own choice, before shifting the conversation to the exclusive servant system at the upcoming Noble Academy. Looking her directly in the eyes, he reveals his intention to bring her to the academy as his sole attendant, a privilege reserved for the elite, because she is the one person he trusts above all others. She continues her desperate flight, scaling the stone walls of the estate while questioning if his pursuit is truly for her. He follows relentlessly, his breath coming in ragged gasps, as he confirms his unwavering intent to keep her by his side. The young noble reaches his limit, his vision blurring from exhaustion, yet he bellows a final, defiant affirmation of his commitment. Seeing the depth of his resolve, her eyes well with tears, the weight of his words finally breaking through her defenses. She halts her ascent, her expression softening into one of quiet acceptance. If he is truly willing to go to such lengths, she realizes she can no longer run from the future he is offering. Turning back toward him with a newfound sense of purpose, she accepts her new role. She pledges herself to him, not just as a maid, but as his dedicated partner at the academy, her heart swelling with a mixture of duty and affection. He doesn't hesitate, leaping down the rocky ledge to reach her side as the wind whips around them. They stand together on the precipice, the chase finally over. Below them, the vast valley stretches out, a serene landscape marked by a distant waterfall that mirrors the tumultuous emotions finally finding peace. She throws her arms around him in a sudden, fierce embrace, promising to be his secret support. She vows to keep the true nature of their bond hidden from the world, ensuring that his reputation remains untarnished while she serves him with all her heart. From a distance, their mentor watches the intimate scene with a knowing, slightly mischievous glint in her eyes. She muses on the scandalous nature of their secret love, her sharp intuition picking up on the shift in their dynamic. Suddenly, the silence of the valley is shattered by a colossal impact as something plummets into the waters below, sending a massive plume of spray into the air. The path forward is now set, a formal engagement to a countess on one hand and a deep, clandestine connection with his devoted servant on the other. The complicated web of his new life has only just begun to weave itself. He could still feel the vibrations of the massive splash in the valley, a sign that others were also preparing for what was to come. In a secluded clearing, Alan stood amidst the rising steam of his own intense training, his dark hair matted with sweat as he looked toward a modest cabin. Gripping his sword tightly before a jagged, tooth-like cave entrance, the young warrior steeled himself for the trials ahead. With his companions watching silently, he realized that the academy entrance exam was nearly upon them, and he would need every ounce of his strength to succeed. Cynthia Violetta maintained a composed yet intense expression as she was questioned about the sufficiency of her current efforts to enhance her magical quality. Nearby, Lilith pushed herself with a fierce determination, insisting to her mentor that she could refine her abilities even further. Milk Vitas monitored the young maid closely, commanding her to balance the energy evenly and lower the output to maintain control, a task Lilith accepted with a strained but resolute nod. He watched the display in silence, his sharp eyes tracking the flow of magic with a contemplative gaze. The young noble's mind drifted to the sheer absurdity of his current circumstances, caught between a formal engagement to Cynthia and a secret, burgeoning bond with Lilith. Looking out over the training grounds where the others gathered, he found himself unable to fully process the chaotic web of relationships he had become entangled in. His thoughts turned toward his father, Ajito, whose machinations had laid the groundwork for this mess. He resolved to voice his grievances once the elder Vincent returned from his diplomatic duties. Breaking the silence, the instructor declared an end to the fundamental exercises, shifting her stance as she prepared to transition the group into the rigors of practical sparring. She then inquired if the two women had ever faced one another in combat before, receiving immediate and confident affirmations from both Lilith and Cynthia, much to the surprise of those watching. As the two joined the training session, The complexity of the situation deepened, leaving the onlookers to wonder how this new dynamic would unfold on the field. She had agreed to oversee their preparation, as the entrance exams for the academy loomed only a few months away. Both the young noblewoman and the maid had sought her tutelage, recognizing the need for rigorous instruction to ensure their success. Looking at the Countess, he noted that her natural talent was already sufficient to pass any test with ease. She possessed an innate grace and power that set her apart from her peers, making the need for extra training seem almost redundant. His thoughts then turned to the maid, whom he had initially intended to keep as a mere attendant. However, her devotion led her to seek academic parity so she could support him better, and he had allowed her to join the testing process out of a sense of shared debt. The instructor's voice cut through his reverie, calling his name as she stood ready with her blade. He couldn't help but worry that the Countess was becoming an even more significant force than the legends had foretold, especially if she truly applied herself to her training. They gathered in the open field, the air still and expectant as the training session reached its next phase. She locked eyes with him, her expression stern as she issued the first command of the day. He would be the one to spar with the Countess first. While the girl with the ponytail offered her enthusiastic support, he felt a flush of heat rise to his cheeks. The instructor didn't miss the opportunity to tease him, warning him not to let his feelings for his fiancée cloud his judgment or hold him back in the coming bout. They took their positions, the grass rustling beneath their boots as they drew their practice weapons. The instructor commanded them to face one another, the tension between the two combatants palpable. He blinked in confusion when no signal to start was given, but she merely watched him with a knowing gaze. She expected them to understand the flow of combat and react instinctively without the need for a formal declaration to begin. Before he could even process the lack of a command, the Countess blurred into motion, launching a devastatingly fast opening strike. He barely had time to register the danger as she closed the distance in a heartbeat. She descends with a ferocity that catches him completely off guard, her wooden blade whistling through the air. He barely manages to raise his own weapon in time, his teeth gritted as the force of her sudden assault rattles his bones. Observing the clash, Milk reminds him that the most critical element of any engagement is seizing the initiative. Before he can even process the lesson, his opponent vanishes from his line of sight, reappearing behind him with a speed that defies logic. He spins around, his eyes wide with disbelief as he finds her already closing the distance once more. The sheer velocity of her movement creates a blur, leaving him struggling to track her trajectory as she prepares another strike. This incredible agility is no mere physical feat. She specializes in ice magic, a discipline she uses to gain a lethal advantage. By infusing her legs with mana, she is able to glide across the ground as if skating on a frozen lake, maintaining her momentum with effortless grace. She continues her relentless pursuit, intentionally targeting his blind spots to keep him on the defensive. He realizes that if he doesn't act now, he will be overwhelmed by her superior mobility. Anticipating her next move, he pivots and swings his wooden blade in a wide arc. The impact is solid and resonant as the wood connects squarely with the top of her head, halting her momentum instantly. The sudden blow brings the sparring session to a jarring halt, leaving her clutching her head in tears. Seeing the distress he's caused, he immediately drops his guard, stammering out an apology while Milk steps in to declare the match over. Milk calmly observes that the strike was an accidental counterattack born from her own high-speed approach. He, however, is in a state of pure panic, desperately explaining that he only intended to give her a light tap to signal his defense. Despite the pain, she is gripped by a deeper sense of frustration, her brow furrowed as she dwells on the outcome. She had sparred many times at her family home, yet never before had an opponent dodged her signature moves with such apparent ease. To soothe the sting of the encounter, Lilith steps forward with a gentle smile to apply a healing spell. As the soft light mends the minor injury, the tension of the duel finally begins to dissipate into the quiet afternoon air. The young maid stands quietly as the instructor questions Weiss on how he managed to track Cynthia's blinding speed, noting that the girl should have been far too fast for him to react so effectively. She watches as the instructor, determined to see if his performance was merely a stroke of luck, decides on a new trial. She is then informed by the instructor that her next task is to face Weiss in combat, and she stands ready with her hair catching a breeze. She remains silent as he is taken aback, questioning why he must fight again so soon, and especially against her. But his protests are quickly dismissed by the instructor. He accepts the challenge, and they square off in the field, Lilith politely expressing her anticipation for the match while he offers a nervous, uncertain agreement. He initially scoffs at the idea, doubting that a mere servant could offer a real challenge in a duel, convinced that her role in the household defines the limits of her strength. He quickly reconsidered, however, as memories of her past displays of unnatural skill and speed flash through his mind, reminding him that her capabilities far exceed her humble title. He feels a cold sweat break across his brow as the realization dawns on him. If he allows his guard to drop for even a second, the consequences could be fatal. Suddenly, she vanishes into a blur of motion, unleashing a flurry of strikes that seem to come from every direction at once. She continues her relentless assault as he barely manages to parry, his teeth gritted as he realizes the sheer intensity of her combat prowess. He grits his teeth, sweat pouring down his face as he struggles to keep up with the blur of motion. Milk observes with a keen eye, noting that he can actually perceive the maid's high-speed maneuvers, a feat she hadn't expected. Nearby, Cynthia and Aura look on in disbelief, realizing that his ability to track such speed wasn't just a stroke of luck. Frustration boils within him as he tries to reconcile this reality with his memories of the original tale, where the girl was merely a background figure with no significant role. He curses under his breath, bewildered by how a simple attendant could possess such overwhelming power. As he watches her, the young woman moves with a grace and lethality that defies her supposed status as a mere student of magic. He realizes with growing dread that her speed far outstrips his own, and that she possesses a deep, instinctive knowledge of swordsmanship that he never anticipated. Despite her incredible display, he knows that defeat is certain if he continues on this path, so he decides to cast aside all restraint. A dark, swirling vortex of energy begins to coalesce above him as he prepares to unleash a desperate gambit. With a sharp cry, he activates his dark heal technique, causing a massive, intricate magic circle to erupt across the training grounds. Aura, caught within the radius, is forced to skid backward as the ground beneath her begins to hum with malevolent power. As the energy surges around her, she recognizes the spell immediately as his own unique creation, a dual-purpose magic designed to mend the wounds of allies while simultaneously sapping the life from enemies with a lingering curse. Her eyes widen in alarm as she feels the oppressive weight of the energy. Realizing the danger she is in, she knows she must escape the boundaries of the circle before the curse takes hold. The vastness of the magical array makes the task daunting as the energy intensifies. While she scrambles to safety, he has been forced to abandon his wooden sword to channel such a complex spell, pressing both hands firmly against the earth. He is now completely vulnerable, his entire focus poured into maintaining the magical field. He remains crouched, low to the ground, the dark circle pulsing with light as he commits everything to this final maneuver. Across the field, his opponent stands ready, the distance between them charged with the impending clash of magic and steel. Weiss lunges forward, recognizing this as his only opportunity. He knows that staying within the magic circle means certain defeat, as he is only capable of close-quarters combat. He resolves to seize the opening before him. With a sharp metallic ring, he intercepts her strike. The impact is sudden, leaving her wide-eyed and momentarily stunned by his successful parry. He drops into a low stance, his blade braced against the ground. He acknowledges her lethal intent, noting that she truly isn't holding back, yet he is surprised to see her own force deflected by his defense. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he reveals the nature of his technique. This absolute barrier is a unique fusion, blending the enduring permanence of dark magic with the protective qualities of light magic. His gaze intensifies, his dark eye activating to track movements beyond normal perception. This is the second pillar of his strategy, a magic he has been carefully maintaining throughout the duel. Standing firm within a shimmering hexagonal field, he understands his physical limits. Though his muscles may not match her blinding speed, the combination of his enhanced vision and the barrier allows him to withstand her onslaught for as long as his mana reserves hold. He stares her down, challenging her to find a way through his defenses. He questions if this is the extent of her power, demanding to know her next move as she stands frozen in disbelief. Suddenly, the air is pierced by a frantic command from the sidelines. The instructor roars for him to deactivate his magic immediately, catching him completely off guard. A wave of vertigo washes over him, his vision blurring as the world begins to spin. He can barely make out her figure in the distance as his focus falters. His heart sinks as she suddenly crumples to the ground. He cries out her name in panic, the duel forgotten as he watches her collapse. She sat slumped against the trunk of a tree, the weight of the duel finally taking its toll as her mentor declared the young noble's total victory. Seeing her distress, the instructor administered an advanced potion, assuring the group she would recover while the young lord offered a quiet, sincere apology for the outcome. As the girl drank the restorative tonic, the teacher expressed her shock at how quickly such a capable maid had been incapacitated, turning her sharp gaze toward the boy to demand an explanation of the magic he had employed. He admitted that while the spell was known as Dark Heal, its true nature was far more complex, involving secondary effects that triggered the moment an opponent stepped within his magical influence. The air itself seemed to grow heavy as the sheer scale of the curse was revealed, a suffocating web of debuffs that stripped away speed, defense, and the very essence of life from anyone caught within its reach. Because her mana reserves were not yet deep enough to withstand such a relentless drain, the young lord explained that the sudden depletion of her energy was what had ultimately forced her body to shut down. However, the true terror of the ability lay in its inversion. He revealed that every ounce of strength, speed, and vitality stolen from his enemies was channeled directly into himself, augmenting his own power to monstrous levels. With a calm smile, he further explained that this power could be shared with those he deemed allies, and that his own strength would only continue to scale upward with every additional foe that entered the fray. The weight of this revelation left the gathered women in stunned silence, their minds racing to grasp the implications of a magic that turned an army's numbers into its greatest weakness. A sudden, chilling realization began to dawn on the instructor as she connected the dots of this forbidden-sounding power. while the young noble himself seemed struck by a sudden, sharp insight. He stared in disbelief, sweat beading on his brow as he questioned if this was truly the moment for such a declaration. Despite the tension, a thrill surged through him. He had always dreamed of uttering the ultimate line that every reincarnated soul yearned to say, convincing himself that the timing was, in fact, perfect. His internal celebration was cut short when Milk Sensei issued a blunt challenge for a duel, leaving him to wonder what he could have possibly done to provoke her. The instructor's gaze was predatory, her excitement palpable as she acknowledged how much he had grown, while he could only offer a faint, uncertain smile in return. She demanded he take responsibility for his newfound strength, insisting he use that very power to quell the battle lust he had ignited within her, a prospect that left him visibly shaken. Following that intense encounter, the training regimen grew even more grueling as Cynthia and Lilith joined the fray, often leaving him face down in the dirt, while Milk stood triumphantly over the crater of his defeat. As the pages of the calendar fluttered by, months of Spartan training passed in a blur, yet the fundamental misunderstandings between him and his companions remained stubbornly unresolved. Eventually, the day of reckoning arrived, and the group stood before the towering gates of their destination, ready to take the next step in their journey. They had reached the Noblesse Magic Academy for the entrance test, a place where paths were destined to cross, and his true trial would begin. Amidst the gravity of the exams, he couldn't help but recall a peculiar encounter on his way back, where he had casually decided to groom a young girl he met to be his fourth wife. They stand frozen in collective shock, their eyes wide as they witness an impossible feat. Milk's gaze is sharp and calculating, while Cynthia and Aura look on with pure disbelief at the spectacle unfolding before them. The Noblesse Magic Academy stands grand and imposing, its sprawling campus a testament to its status as the kingdom's most prestigious institution. Today, the air is thick with anticipation as the entrance exams begin. Within the gates, a sea of aspiring students and their families gather. Whispers of the academy's vast size and the difficulty of the upcoming tests ripple through the crowd, highlighting the high stakes for everyone present. Amidst the bustle, a confrontation erupts. A large, brutish man looms over a smaller, trembling student, accusing him of staring and demanding to know if he wants trouble. Watching the scene unfold, he narrows his eyes, his expression hardening into a cold, calculating glare. He slowly cracks his knuckles, the sound sharp against the backdrop of the bully's aggressive shouting. As he steps forward, the surrounding crowd begins to murmur, their voices hushed with a mix of fear and recognition. They recognize him as the infamous, abusive noble, and the weight of his dark reputation precedes him. Nearby, onlookers shift their focus to the two striking young women accompanying him. They speculate on the identity of the one who must be Lady Cynthia Violetta, wondering if the rumors of an engagement between the two noble houses are indeed true. The bully's bravado instantly evaporates as he catches sight of the newcomer's face. His eyes widen in sheer terror, his voice trembling as he stammers out the name of the villainous noble he has inadvertently crossed. Desperate to avoid the young lord's wrath, the man drops to his knees, bowing his head to the ground in a frantic plea for mercy. He dismisses the groveling man with a cold command to simply disappear from his sight. He watches the man flee, a sense of weary resignation settling over him. Despite the time that has passed since his reincarnation, it seems the shadow of his former self's reputation is not so easily cast aside. Reflecting on the 2 years of rigorous training he has endured, he reaffirms his resolve. He knows that to truly change his fate, he must be as friendly as possible and gradually reshape the world's perception of the name Vincent. He stood before the academy, the weight of the entrance exam finally upon him. Beside him, the young man he had just assisted offered a sincere word of gratitude, unaware that he was the very person the noble had resolved to surpass. The dark-haired youth stepped forward with a bright, earnest expression, extending his hand in a gesture of friendship as he introduced himself as Alan. Recognizing the noble, Alan's gaze remained steady and hopeful, encouraging them both to give their absolute best in the trials ahead. He looked down at the offered hand, his expression unreadable as he reciprocated the sentiment, wishing for their mutual success despite the internal conflict brewing within him. Their hands hovered in the air, a bridge between two destined paths that had only just begun to cross. The sudden chime of a warning bell shattered the moment, drawing the attention of their companions who urged them to make haste before the examination commenced. Among them was Cheryl Elias, a childhood friend of Alan's, who paused to offer her own quiet thanks for the assistance provided to her companion. As the group hurried toward the academy gates, he remained behind for a fleeting second, his brow furrowed by a sudden, inexplicable chill that settled deep in his chest. He stared at his own hand, realizing with a start that he had hesitated, an instinctive reluctance preventing him from fully committing to the handshake. A profound sense of unease washed over him, leaving him to wonder why a simple conversation with the boy had filled him with such an unbearable, haunting dread. He moves through the academy halls, his mind fixed on the upcoming trial. While he harbors no personal ill will toward Alan, he knows that for his own survival, he must secure a victory in the exam while maintaining a careful, calculated distance from a boy. This focus carries him through the written portion of the entrance exam, where he sits among the other hopefuls, his pen moving with precision as he continues to plan his future interactions from a safe periphery. Once the papers are collected, The atmosphere shifts as an instructor announces the commencement of the practical combat test, instructing the candidates to don specialized protective gear designed to mitigate the impact of both physical and magical strikes. As the man speaks, a strange, rhythmic throbbing begins to pulse in the young noble's chest, an unsettling sensation he cannot seem to suppress. Clad in the stark white and black combat uniform, he stands ready alongside his peers, including the elegant Cynthia and the focused Aura, his expression hardening as he tightens his gloves. Nearby, the dark-haired youth shares a quiet but intense moment with Cheryl, his voice low as he declares his singular intent to utterly crush his noble rival in the arena. Hearing the weight of such ambition, or perhaps fueled by the strange heat in his own blood, the silver-haired youth looks out over the assembled students and feels a dark, intrusive thought take root. It is no longer just about one rival, but a sudden, overwhelming urge to dominate every single person standing in his way. As the instructor outlines the rules of engagement, victory by expulsion from the ring or total surrender, the young noble finds himself drenched in a cold sweat, his mind reeling as he struggles to understand the source of this sudden, violent impulse. The tension is momentarily broken when a towering, broad-shouldered student raises a hand to clarify the safety protocols, prompting the instructor to reassure the group that he will intervene should any bout become life-threatening. This giant of a boy, known as Duke, and his equally muscular companion begin to grumble about the fit and odor of the hand-me-down uniforms, their complaints drawing a sharp rebuke from the instructor, who has little patience for vanity in the face of trial. Amidst the final preparations, Alan offers a boisterous shout of encouragement to Duke, while the instructor signals the start of the proceedings, promising proper attire only to those who prove their worth in the circle. He stands among the other candidates as the girls nearby discuss the academy's grim reality. Cynthia observes that the surplus of uniforms exists only because so many students abandon their studies and vanish, while her companion marvels at the school's ability to provide gear for every applicant. She wears a chillingly knowing smile, agreeing that the true nightmare only begins once one passes through the academy's gates. Beyond those gates lies Noblesse Academy, the kingdom's most elite yet merciless training ground, where any sign of weakness results in instant expulsion. The intensity of the curriculum is such that many who survive choose to cast away their uniforms forever, while others never make out alive at all. The young noble remains undeterred by these dark rumors, privately noting that even the most unmotivated individuals from the tales he knows manage to secure a place here, making the entrance exam seem like a trivial hurdle. As he waits, the first heavy drops of rain begin to fall, cooling the air as they splash against his shoulders. The silence is broken by the instructor's booming voice, summoning examinee number 909, Weiss Vincent, to face his opponent, examinee 907, Alan. The young man with the dark, messy hair looks up in surprise, his gaze meeting the cold, steady eyes of the noble who stands ready to crush him. With the downpour intensifying, the officials order the remaining spectators to clear the field, leaving only the two combatants to settle their fate. They stand positioned at opposite ends of the ring, the wind whipping around them as the long-awaited duel finally begins. The arena remains dry under an invisible barrier, while the torrential rain falls all around, much to the amazement of the gathered students. Within this dry sanctuary, the dark-haired challenger prepares himself, buoyed by the shouts of his peers. He admits to his opponent that he never expected their paths to cross in such a formal mock battle. His noble adversary remains stoic, offering no verbal response, even as his loyal maid calls out words of encouragement from the stands. The instructor's voice cuts through the tension, officially signaling the commencement of the duel. Immediately, the silver-haired noble becomes a blur of motion, his speed defying the eyes of the spectators as he delivers a devastating blow. Following the strike, a sinister energy known as Dark Heel erupts from him, swirling around his form in a violent vortex. The impact leaves the challenger reeling in agony, his cries of pain echoing through the arena and drawing gasps of horror from the watching girls. Standing over his wounded foe, the victor feels a strange sensation, a realization that something is fundamentally wrong with the power he just unleashed. He struggles to suppress a sudden, violent urge to completely crush his opponent, a dark instinct that seems to be bubbling up from deep within his soul. As he grapples with this internal darkness, a malevolent shadow of himself looms behind him, its presence terrifying those who witness the transformation. The grand facade of the academy stands silent as the entrance exams finally draw to a close, leaving an air of anticipation hanging over the grounds. Inside a lavishly appointed chamber, a heavy silence hangs over a massive round table where the academy's elite have gathered to discuss the results. A voice breaks the quiet, demanding to know what influence was exerted over the young Weiss to produce such an anomaly. They sit together, the Vincent family butler and the S-rank adventurer, remaining stoic under the intense scrutiny of the academy's leadership. Zeds and Milk offer no immediate defense, their expressions unreadable as they face the weight of the inquiry. The boy's father watches the proceedings from the shadows with a sharp, calculating gaze, reflecting on the unexpected turn of events. It seemed almost impossible that his son would exceed all expectations so drastically, yet the evidence was undeniable. He had been a vision of grit and determination during the trials, standing amidst the aftermath of the combat exams, bloodied but unyielding, Weiss had shattered every existing benchmark across the entire curriculum. The headmaster, a man of great age and wisdom named Gills, leans forward and addresses the two guardians directly. He seeks their insight into the nature of the boy they raised, questioning the implications of a student possessing such volatile and dangerous abilities. This inquiry hangs heavy in the air as the council waits for a response that might explain the anomaly they have witnessed within the academy walls. Their deliberation is interrupted when the heavy doors creak open, and a stern instructor enters the room to address the high-level meeting with urgent information. He is Darius, a man known for his precision, and he quickly moves to correct the record regarding the boys' unprecedented scores. While Weiss's performance was indeed the highest in the history of the institution, he notes that it did not technically stand alone as a new record. The instructor reminds the gathered lords of a student from the previous year, a girl who had achieved the exact same level of perfection, tying for the top spot and leaving her own indelible mark on the academy's history. He listens as Lord Egido explains his minimal role in Weiss's development, claiming he merely provided sustenance. Beside him, Milk Avidas dismisses her own contribution, stating she offered nothing more than the most fundamental training. The nobleman continues, adding with a straight face that he ensured the boy received an abundance of protein. This unfamiliar term leaves the instructor visibly bewildered, his mind racing to understand what such a thing could even mean in the context of magical growth. A spread of mundane foods, soy, dairy, and chicken, is presented as the secret behind the boy's power. It is a diet so ordinary that it leaves the seasoned warrior in a state of stunned silence. Unable to contain his frustration, he slams his fist onto the table, shouting that such a simple regimen could never account for the mastery of the four major attributes, let alone the rare creation magics of light and dark. He feels as though his years of discipline are being mocked by the sheer absurdity of the claim. His outrage only grows as he turns to see Milk casually draining a large tankard of ale. He bellows at her, demanding to know why she is drinking so brazenly in the presence of the headmaster. The woman simply slumps over, the alcohol having taken its toll, leaving her unconscious at the table. The headmaster watches the display with a weary sigh, while the instructor can only mutter about the absurdity of the situation. He grips his hand tightly, his thoughts turning to the sheer injustice of it all. While the headmaster urges him to remain calm, the instructor cannot shake the feeling that the ease of Weiss's success is a cruel insult to those who have truly suffered to gain their strength. His mind drifts back to a grim scene in the pouring rain, where a battered and bloodied Alan struggled to stay upright. The young man leaned heavily against his mentor, his body pushed far beyond its limits in the pursuit of power. The memory is vivid. The boy looked as though he were at death's door. It was a moment of pure desperation, a testament to the grueling path a commoner must walk to achieve even a fraction of what the noble boy possesses naturally. He remains consumed by bitterness, comparing Alan's hard-won talent and near-fatal training to the effortless rise of the Vincent heir. To him, Weiss's smug existence is a direct affront to the very concept of earned power, and he refuses to accept that such a gap can exist. He stood there, teeth clenched in a silent snarl, as Milk Avidas leaned in with a mocking glint in her eyes. She didn't hold back, labeling his bitterness as unsightly and questioning if his current outburst was merely a reaction to his recent defeat in their match. Before the tension could boil over, Headmaster Gills commanded them both to cease their bickering. Darius, however, was not easily silenced, snapping back that the fault lay with Milk for failing to provide Weiss with proper guidance from the start. Turning his attention back to the headmaster, the instructor voiced his lingering doubts regarding Weiss's official enrollment into the academy, unable to reconcile the boy's sudden growth with his previous reputation. The elderly headmaster remained unmoved, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty as he declared that Weiss was not the type of man to ever wield his formidable power against those weaker than himself. As the debate continued within the walls, the subject of their discussion walked through the academy gates, leaving the heavy atmosphere of the meeting behind. It was clear to those who knew him. The young noble had undergone a profound transformation. Flanked by Cynthia and Lilith, Weiss looked down at the enrollment papers in his hands. He was no longer a man defined solely by his innate talent, but one who sought to forge his path through relentless, genuine effort and courage. Beside him, Lilith couldn't contain her joy, waving her own documents in the air with a bright smile, while Cynthia looked on with a sense of quiet triumph, their shared future at the academy now a reality. The grand, domed architecture of the Noblesse Magic Academy stood as a silent witness to the arrival of a new class, its halls soon to be filled with the voices of aspiring mages from across the realm. Inside one of the ornate lecture halls, the students took their seats as a woman named Chloe stood before them. Adjusting her glasses, she officially welcomed the group, announcing that she would be the instructor in charge of their class for the coming term. Among the sea of new faces, Weiss sat with a composed expression, his gaze steady as he observed his new classmates, a diverse group of individuals, each harboring their own ambitions and secrets within the academy's walls. He stands alongside his companions as the official welcome to the Noblesse Magic Academy is finalized, marking the true beginning of their journey within these prestigious walls. Settling into the lecture hall, the young noble casts a wary glance toward his fellow students, his eyes narrowing as they land on a familiar, unwelcome face. There, sitting with an air of quiet confidence, is Alan, the very boy who had pushed him to his absolute limits during the entrance trials. Looking at his rival, he recalls the day of the exam when he technically emerged victorious. Though the memory brings him little comfort, his mind drifts back to the heat of that battle, remembering how he had been nearly consumed by a dark, overwhelming rage that almost led him to kill the boy in cold blood. Despite the brutal punishment, Alan had shown an unnatural resilience, growing stronger with every blow as if fueled by the very essence of a hero's destiny. While the final result was a decisive victory for the noble, the sheer effort required to bring the commoner down had left a bitter, lingering taste in his mouth. Back in the classroom, he curses under his breath, realizing he has witnessed the terrifying tenacity of a true protagonist. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by the sharp snap of instructor Chloe's fingers. A collective gasp ripples through the room as a brilliant light begins to emanate from the back of every student's hand, catching them all by surprise. Chloe reveals the source of the glow, a magical seal representing the 1,000 points that have just been granted to each of them as their starting balance. She adjusted her glasses, her gaze sharp as she explained that these points were a measure that would follow them until graduation. The students murmured in confusion, wondering what exactly these points represented and why they were being assigned so early. Turning to the chalkboard where the number 1,000 was displayed, she noted that while the general student body started with that amount, Weiss Vincent was a notable exception to the rule. The young noble looked down in surprise as the magical seal on his hand flared with light, revealing the number 2,000. She clarified that this doubled amount was a direct reward for his exceptional performance during the entrance exams. A wave of disbelief swept through the classroom, the other candidates whispering frantically about the massive disparity in their starting balances and the perceived favoritism. He stood there, brow furrowed in silent contemplation, while his peers loudly questioned the fairness of the system and whether these points were merely a substitute for traditional grades. The demands for a clearer explanation grew louder, with students pleading for their instructor to be more forthcoming about the rules of this new environment and how they could earn more. Sensing their growing agitation, she sighed and pushed her glasses up, deciding that a verbal explanation would be insufficient. She believed that true understanding would only come through direct experience rather than words. With a commanding tone, she ordered the class to arm themselves with wooden swords and proceed immediately to the academy's training grounds for their first practical lesson. The bright, open sky stretched over the campus as the students transitioned from the confines of the classroom to the outdoor arena. Standing before the assembled group in the center of the field, she announced the commencement of a combat test, reminding them that while they had been accepted into the academy, their journey to graduation was far from guaranteed. She delivers the final, crushing blow to the students' composure. The point system isn't just a ranking, but a lifeline. Any student whose tally drops to 0 will face immediate expulsion, a revelation that leaves the gathered candidates, including the boy with the headband, reeling in shock. The instructor then sets the stage for their first trial, decreeing that they will engage in combat until someone's points are completely depleted. Weiss stands amidst his peers, his expression hardening as he realizes the cutthroat nature of the academy, while Cynthia and Alan prepare themselves for the impending fray. Far from the academy's walls, Milk Avitas finds herself languishing in boredom, the days feeling hollow since her pupil's departure. Even as she casually sits amidst a group of defeated thieves she has just dispatched, her thoughts remain fixed on the void left by the young noble, her gaze reflecting a mix of loneliness and a sudden, mischievous spark of inspiration. She decides then and there to bridge the distance, resolving to obtain a teaching license and infiltrate the Noblesse Magic Academy herself. Looking toward the distant spires of the institution, a playful yet ominous smile crosses her lips as she senses the brewing chaos that her arrival will undoubtedly accelerate. A young man with light, feathered hair approaches Weiss with a confident air. He introduces himself as Louis Mysant, praising Weiss's performance in the mock battle and noting his record-breaking score. In the chronicles of the original tale, this youth was destined for greatness, a top-tier student with a bright future and impeccable grades. Yet, the reality unfolding on the training grounds tells a far different story as he sinks to his knees in the dirt. Standing over him, instructor Chloe holds up a circular device displaying a cold, hollow 0. Her voice is sharp as she demands to know if he understood the gravity of the result. She delivers the final, crushing blow to his aspirations, declaring that Louis Mysant is officially expelled from the academy. He remains motionless on the ground, blood trickling down his chin, while the one who defeated him stands silently in the distance. The shock of the decree leaves him paralyzed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Behind him, the victor begins to turn away, the weight of the confrontation still hanging heavy in the air. This victor, Alan, wipes a smear of blood from his lip, his expression a mask of grim intensity. He had not just won, he had utterly dismantled his opponent, leaving no room for doubt or recovery. Later that day, the grand dining hall of the academy is filled with the low hum of conversation as students gather for their evening meal. The vast, vaulted ceiling echoes with the clatter of cutlery and the mundane concerns of school life. Amidst the crowd, Weiss sits alone before a tray of untouched food, his brow furrowed in deep frustration. He curses under his breath, grappling with the realization that the events he anticipated are spiraling out of control. He had intended to follow the established path, limiting his interference to the necessary confrontation with Alan to keep the world's narrative intact. However, his efforts to preserve the scenario have seemingly backfired, creating ripples he never intended. As he watches Cynthia engage in light conversation nearby, the most glaring deviation weighs on his mind. Despite his best efforts to remain a background figure, the primary heroine of this world has somehow become his betrothed. He feels the weight of the world shifting as the departure of Louis Meissen on the very first day signals a total collapse of the timeline he once knew, leaving everything spiraling into unforeseen chaos. This unexpected turn of events is accompanied by something far more sinister. A surge of dark, malevolent emotions rising from the depths of the original Weiss's soul, threatening to consume his current self. Since his encounter with Alan, a primal aggression has begun to take hold, a voice within demanding he lash out not just at his rival, but at everyone in his path. His knuckles whiten as he grips his spoon, the carefully laid plans of playing the benevolent noble crumbling under a sudden, violent urge to simply crush those around him. He fears that if he surrenders to this internal darkness and begins hurting others, he will inevitably become the pariah the original story dictated, a villain hated by all. As he stares down at his half-finished meal, a calm voice cuts through his internal turmoil, questioning if his desire is truly to destroy everyone around him. Cynthia looks up from her own seat, her expression unreadable as she tells him that such a path is perfectly acceptable if it is truly what he desires, showing no sign of shock at his dark thoughts. Stunned by her lack of judgment, he can barely find the words to ask why she isn't reacting with horror to his admission, eventually settling for a polite thanks to the chef as he prepares to leave the table. She fixes him with a steady gaze, reminding him that they are within the walls of the Noblesse Magic Academy, a place where strength and ambition are the currency of the realm, and such ruthlessness is expected. With a soft, almost weary sigh, she admits she had been worried about him, noting that despite his reputation, he has always been far too kind for his own good in this harsh environment. She continues her explanation, noting that her perception of him shifted after witnessing his performance during the test. In a world where one must either dominate or be dominated, she insists that showing mercy to opponents is a luxury he cannot afford. Because of this harsh reality, she argues that they must embrace ruthlessness to maintain their standing. Despite the weight of her words, she softens her tone, promising to support him no matter what path he chooses, while Lilith watches the exchange with a silent, worried intensity. As the heavy conversation lingers, the local chef interrupts to offer another bowl of pot au feu, but Lilith politely declines, her appetite suppressed by the gravity of the situation. Returning her focus to him, the noblewoman leans in with a sharp, expectant gaze, reminding him that as her fiancé, he is expected to possess the drive to surpass all others. He takes a moment to absorb their words, offering a sincere thanks to both women for their candor and presence. Reflecting on the discussion, he admits that while he hasn't fully resolved his internal conflict, speaking with them has provided a much-needed perspective on his current predicament. Seeing his lingering hesitation, the young maid offers a simple, practical solution, a coin toss to decide his next move if he remains truly torn. He stares at the small piece of metal, contemplating the notion of surrendering his choice to the whims of fate. With a growing sense of resolve, he realizes that if the future is truly unwritten, then the rigid expectations of his role are already beginning to crumble, making a gamble as good as any plan. A faint, determined smile touches his lips as he prepares to let the coin dictate his path, deciding to silence his doubts and let chance take the lead. He stands amidst the emotional pleas of the Academy chef, who tearfully insists that every morsel of the meal be consumed. The weight of the man's effort is palpable, yet his mind is elsewhere, focused on a far more significant gamble. With a flick of his thumb, the silver disc is sent soaring into the air, tracing a high arc through the sterile Academy hallway, while his companions watch in silence. As the coin clatters onto the floor and begins its frantic spin, he watches it with an intensity that ignores the chef's lingering sobs. The two faces of the currency represent divergent paths, the kingdom's castle on the front and a dragon, the mark of the strongest, on the reverse. Should the castle face upward, he resolves to suppress his darker impulses and seek a peaceful coexistence with his rival, hoping to avert a disastrous future. However, his gaze hardens as he considers the alternative. If the dragon shows itself, a different, more aggressive course will be set. The spinning metal finally loses its momentum, wobbling before coming to a rest on the cold floor, only to be immediately claimed by an unexpected hand. The newcomer is none other than Alan, who stands tall in his uniform and offers a casual greeting, explaining that he managed to secure his enrollment despite their previous brutal encounter. A genuine smile spreads across the young warrior's face as he admits his sincere happiness at their paths crossing once more. Looking back at his rival, the noble realizes that his own desire wasn't for peace, but for the chance to test his strength against the boy again. He catches the coin, the metal clicking against his palm as he acknowledges the situation with a simple, knowing remark. Holding the dragon-faced coin aloft, he offers a sharp, competitive grin, mirroring the resolve he sees in his new rival. The tension of their meeting soon gives way to the mundane routine of academy life, as they find themselves side by side in the bustling dining hall. The chef offers another helping of the hearty stew, and for a moment, the weight of their destinies is replaced by the simple comfort of a shared meal. However, the peace of the cafeteria is short-lived once they step onto the training grounds. Under the watchful eyes of the instructors, he unleashes a devastating burst of magical force, sending an opponent sprawling across the stone arena, while the faculty notes the conclusion of the bout. Among those falling before his relentless advance is Chris Schlegel, who collapses in defeat as the cold decree of expulsion is pronounced. No sooner has she fallen than another takes her place. Gustav Gregorio charges forward with a guttural roar, his face contorted with desperate effort. His brute force is met with surgical precision as the noble sidesteps the charge and delivers a finishing blow, leaving Gustav to join the growing list of those deemed unworthy of the Academy's halls. The purge they initiated continues unabated across the grounds, with student after student, Karuna, Layman, and others whose names are already being forgotten falling to the wayside, their dreams of becoming mages shattered in an instant. Watching their downfall from a distance, Cynthia observes his efficiency with a mix of pride and calculation, noting that he has already cleared 6 more rivals from their path. She quickly coordinates with Lilith, directing her to flank the remaining opposition and draw their attention while they maintain their momentum. Under her watchful gaze, he stands tall, his focus fixed on the horizon with a newfound clarity. He realizes that the hesitation that once plagued him has vanished, replaced by a debt of gratitude toward the one who pushed him to this point. He is met with Alan's explosive defiance, as the young warrior roars a vow to crush him head-on and dismantle the very foundations of the current situation. Amidst the escalating tension, Cynthia maintains her cold, tactical observation from the sidelines, her presence a silent weight alongside the other students caught in the wake of this deepening rivalry. As the echoes of the confrontation fade into the night, a heavy silence falls over the academy. Under the pale glow of the moon, a lone student sits huddled on the floor of her dormitory, her silhouette a portrait of isolation against the indifferent stone walls of the institution. Within those walls, the psychological toll of the impending expulsions has reached a breaking point. A young girl, her face marked by a small bandage and eyes brimming with tears, whispers a desperate plea for help as she feels her future slipping away. She urges her companion, Carta, to persevere even if she is forced to leave, the weight of the 22-day countdown pressing down on her like an inescapable sentence. The match concludes with a decisive victory for Weiss Vincent, who stands tall while his opponent, Alan, remains grounded in defeat. The announcement rings out, confirming that Weiss's fierce advance through the Academy's ranks continues unabated. His dominance didn't stop there. Since enrollment began a month ago, his path has been marked by the departure of 10 students who couldn't keep up, 7 of whom he personally eliminated from the competition. He reflects on his own performance with a cold, calculating satisfaction, knowing he was the one who sent the majority of his rivals packing. When the official rankings are posted, a crowd of students gathers, in hushed whispers, to witness an unprecedented sweep. The boards for Magic Defense, Magic Tracking, and Magic Stealth all display the same name at the very top. Seeing the results in black and white, they can hardly believe their eyes as they realize he has secured the first-place position in every single field of study. This overwhelming display of talent prompts Duke to confront him directly, pointing a finger and demanding to know if this is somehow his second time living through these events. He continues his tirade, shouting about the sheer impossibility of such strength and questioning what kind of insane training regimen could allow someone to slip past Cheryl's magic threads, as if they were nothing. The details of the recent flag battle only reinforced the gap between them, as he had flattened Alan in an instant and snatched the objective before anyone could even blink, earning a staggering score of 5,700 points. He remains relentless in his questioning, loudly wondering just how much virtue his rival must have accumulated in a previous life to possess such natural, overwhelming ability. Amidst the shouting, the defeated warrior can only look down in shame, offering a quiet apology to his friends for failing to overcome the wall that is Weiss Vincent once again. He stands dejected as his childhood friend offers words of encouragement, urging him not to dwell on the loss and to focus on the next victory. Nearby, the victor observes the exchange with a cold, calculating gaze. The young noble closes his eyes, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over him as he accepts the current state of affairs. He reflects on the reputation of his former self, a man loathed for his spiteful nature and the underhanded methods he used to ruin those around him. Unlike that shadow of the past, he now finds a strange peace in his actions, believing that as long as he triumphs through legitimate skill, there is no reason for guilt or the hatred of others. However, his composure wavers when he notices the girl's piercing, almost predatory stare fixed upon him, her silent intensity causing a bead of sweat to roll down his temple. Seeking to escape the uncomfortable scrutiny, he makes his exit, only to have his attention caught by a stern conversation echoing through the hallway. The academy instructor, Chloe, is delivering a harsh ultimatum to a struggling student, warning her that failure in the upcoming practical exam will not be tolerated. The student, a girl named Carta Viole, offers a quiet, trembling affirmation of her well-being, though her downcast eyes betray a deep-seated anxiety. Watching from the shadows, the noble realizes the instructor's cold dismissal is merely the beginning of the girl's misfortune. He recalls the tragic trajectory of the original narrative, where this girl's expulsion was destined to serve as nothing more than a catalyst for her friend's eventual rise to power. He contemplates the tragic trajectory of the girl before him, recalling how the original narrative dictated her departure. In that version of events, a fair match resulted in her best friend's expulsion, leaving her isolated and destined to fade away. As he watches her walk across the academy grounds, he realizes that without intervention, she will simply vanish from this world without leaving a single mark behind. This somber reflection is interrupted by a group of students who corner the girl, mockingly inquiring about her plans for the upcoming examination. They sneer at her, reminding her that the next trial is a tag battle and cruelly questioning if someone as lonely as her could even find a partner. The girl remains silent, her expression tightening as they bring up her former companion, the one who has already been cast out of the academy. With a chorus of mocking laughter, the group saunters off, leaving her to stand in the shadow of their derision. However, their amusement is cut short when he suddenly steps into view, causing the bullies to recoil in genuine shock at his unexpected presence. Ignoring the fleeing students, he approaches the girl and makes a startling proposal. He wants her to be his partner for the next exam. Later, far from the prying eyes of their classmates, the two stand upon a windswept cliff overlooking the sprawling academy. Still reeling from the offer, she looks at him with uncertainty, questioning why a noble of his standing would ever choose to pair up with someone as unremarkable as herself. She hesitated, her voice trembling as she pointed out the obvious disparity between them, reminding him of his status as the top-ranked first year and her own precarious position on the brink of expulsion. She argued that they were in no way a suitable match, especially considering his connection to Lady Cynthia. Suddenly, her breath hitched as a chilling presence manifested in the woods behind him. A dark, feminine silhouette stood motionless among the trees, radiating an aura of pure malice that seemed to freeze the very air. Sensing her sudden terror, he turned to ask what was wrong, but she could only stare in wide-eyed silence at the figure looming in the shadows. The mysterious woman watched them with cold, hollow eyes, her presence heavy with an unspoken threat. He dismissed her fear with a calm, almost dismissive tone, asking if her hesitation stemmed from concerns regarding his fiancée. His gaze was steady, seemingly oblivious to the spectral figure that had just vanished from the tree line. He went on to explain that Cynthia's primary desire was for him to excel above all others at the academy. In his view, she would surely understand that choosing a partner was merely a tactical decision, a necessary means to secure victory in the upcoming trials. Despite his logical explanation, she remained shaken, her mind reeling from the intense bloodlust she had just perceived. Sensing her distraction, he called out her name, firmly pulling her attention back to the conversation at hand. He clarified his intentions, insisting that his offer wasn't born of pity or a simple desire to be helpful. He claimed he lacked the emotional energy to mourn the departure of every failing student, framing his proposal as a matter of cold pragmatism. He noted that her expulsion would be a genuine waste of potential, a sentiment that left her questioning her own senses. She wondered if the terrifying presence she had felt moments ago was nothing more than a trick of her stressed imagination. He continued his assessment, praising her rare ability to suppress her magical signature so effectively that it remained undetected even by skilled mages. To let such a talent go to waste, he argued, would be a strategic error he wasn't willing to make. He concluded that partnering with her was simply the most efficient path forward for the next exam, leaving her speechless at his blunt evaluation of her worth. Meanwhile, from the safety of the distant shadows, the watchful eyes of his fiancée continued to track their every move. She steps out from the shadows of the massive trees, her presence immediately startling the young girl. With a knowing smirk, she commends the girl's impressive sensing ability, her eyes gleaming with a mix of curiosity and calculation. The noblewoman continues, musing aloud whether the girl's perception might actually surpass Weiss's own dark eye skill, given her ability to detect magical traces that even he had missed. However, she points out a flaw, noting that while the girl sensed her, she completely failed to notice the presence of Lilith, a master of assassination techniques who had silently materialized right behind her. Shifting the topic to the Academy's upcoming challenges, she reveals that the next tag battle will be a joint examination involving students from all 3 years. She explains that while she and her peers are capable of holding their own against upperclassmen, Weiss has clearly devised a specific winning strategy that relies on the girl's unique concealment abilities. Flanking the trembling girl alongside the maid, she graciously encourages her to proceed with the exam as Weiss's partner, announcing that she herself will be teaming up with Lilith. The weight of the situation leaves the girl paralyzed with fear, her face pale as the two formidable women loom over her like predators. Moments later, she listens as Weiss reaffirms his decision, emphasizing that because time is short before the exam, their special training must commence without delay. He stands before her with a determined gaze, ready to mold their partnership into a force capable of surviving the trials ahead. Weiss officially commences the grueling preparation for the joint year tag battle, launching into a specialized training program alongside Carta. Though she manages a faint, affirmative response, her expression betrays a deep sense of dread. Her eyes are wide and vacant, and a solitary tear escapes as she maintains a pained, artificial grin. Observing her sudden emotional collapse, he is forced to question why she has already broken down in tears before the real work has even started. Walking through the serene academy grounds, Weiss attempts to master the intricacies of flying magic, though the progress is slow. He is met with a playful jab from Carta, who points out that he hasn't managed to stay airborne for more than a few fleeting seconds. She listens as he admits that while their plan for the exam involves him riding with her, rendering his own flight unnecessary, he still feels a pull toward the skill. He explains that he viewed this as a rare opportunity to learn a difficult discipline, one that he didn't want to let slip away. His philosophy is simple. Any magic can become a powerful asset depending on how it is utilized, and there is no harm in expanding one's repertoire. He then offers a sincere apology for involving her in his extra training, acknowledging that it has nothing to do with their shared exam requirements. His gaze turns intense as he reaffirms his commitment to her, vowing that he will do everything in his power to ensure she isn't expelled. He follows this with a tentative request, asking if she would be willing to continue helping him with his flight training even after the pressure of the exam has passed. She can't help but giggle softly to herself, struck by the realization that the dark rumors surrounding the young noble couldn't be further from the truth. She looks at him with newfound warmth and admiration, agreeing to his request while silently acknowledging just how hard he works behind his stern exterior. She stands before him, listening as he offers his assistance, provided she is comfortable with the arrangement. As she looks at him, she reflects on the rumors surrounding his name. While others dismiss him as a lazy, disgraced noble, she sees a completely different man. Following behind him as they walk through the academy grounds, she realizes he is a diligent worker, always eager to learn, and finds herself aspiring to match his dedication. Elsewhere in the academy, Instructor Chloe gazes out a window, her thoughts turning toward the same young man, Weiss Vincent. In his office, Headmaster Gills examines a report with a look of disbelief, noting that the scores achieved by such an underclassman are nearly unprecedented. Instructor Chloe confirms the findings with a nod, adding that Weiss was personally responsible for the defeat of more than half of the students who were recently expelled. While acknowledging his impressive feats, she notes that this year's cohort is particularly exceptional, pointing to others like Chris and Gustav who have shown remarkable potential. However, she admits that the most surprising individual of all is Alan, the apprentice of Instructor Darius. He is a relentless force, rising from the brink of failure and returning stronger after every setback. Beyond him, she notes two others who caught her off guard, their power manifesting in the violent clashes echoing from the training grounds. Lilith and Cynthia face each other, their eyes locked in a silent challenge as they prepare for another bout. They have both progressed at a staggering rate, far beyond what anyone could have predicted when they first arrived at the academy, their power manifesting in the shattered stone surrounding them. The two of them push themselves to the absolute limit, engaging in lethal combat with sharpened steel instead of the blunted wooden swords used by other students, treating every strike as if their lives were on the line. This brutal, life-or-death training has forged them into warriors of incredible strength, each strike carrying the weight of their shared determination and the scars of their relentless practice. Eventually, the sheer physical and mental strain forces them to a halt, their bodies battered and their breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. She kneels before her companion, her hands glowing with a soft, restorative light as she begins to mend the wounds they inflicted upon each other during their duel. As the magic works its wonders, they exchange words of mutual respect, with Cynthia acknowledging Lilith's impressive skill while Lilith humbly returns the compliment. She wipes a smear of blood from her lip, her gaze hardening with a renewed sense of purpose as she vows to push herself even further to reach new heights of power. Her motivation is not merely to serve as a maid, but to stand as an equal beside Weiss, a proud and capable individual who can protect him rather than just following in his wake. She smiles, her heart filled with the resolve to become a pillar of strength for the man she admires, determined to grow stronger for his sake and her own. She kneels upon the training ground, her voice trembling with a newfound resolve as she confesses her desire to grow stronger. Her motivation is clear. She no longer wishes to be a burden, but a reliable shield for the man she serves, especially when he finds himself in peril. She listens as her companion offers a warm smile and a compliment, insisting that her current strength is already quite formidable. Despite the praise, the young maid remains humble, claiming she is yet to reach the heights of the noble woman standing before her. Her expression shifts, however, as a more calculating glint enters her eyes while she contemplates their true objective. Beyond mere training, their immediate goal is to systematically isolate the girl named Carta, pulling her away from the young lord's side to clear the path for their own designs. She sits alone in the quiet of the evening, a sudden, inexplicable chill running down her spine that causes her to shiver. Unaware of the schemes being woven in the shadows, she wonders why the air has turned so cold so abruptly, a premonition of the trials to come. The day of the grand exam finally arrives, and the academy courtyard is filled with the low hum of nervous energy as students gather around a massive, glowing magical seal. The air is thick with anticipation, marking the beginning of a critical turning point for every aspiring mage present. He stands amidst the crowd, his boisterous energy undiminished as he suggests a simple game of rock, paper, scissors to settle their pairings. Duke Billion seems more excited than anxious, treating the high-stakes exam with the same competitive spirit he brings to a common brawl. He bellows the rules to his peers, declaring that whoever loses the game must accept the fate of pairing up with a complete stranger for the duration of the test. While some find his antics exhausting, his enthusiasm serves to break the tension hanging over the group. They quickly engage in the contest, hands flashing in the air as the sounds of the game echo across the courtyard. It is a brief moment of levity before the true challenge begins, as the students finalize their partnerships under the watchful eyes of the instructors. The countdown begins, a stern voice echoing through the area as the first pair is prepared for departure. With a flash of light and a surge of magical power, they're informed that their destination is the rugged and dangerous terrain of Mount Garriel. They materialize in the heart of a dense forest, the transition instantaneous and jarring. Quickly regaining their bearings, the duo confirms their strategy. They will hunt down the upperclassmen who hold the highest point values, aiming to secure their victory through calculated aggression. He and the other students find themselves scattered across the vast, rugged terrain of Mount Garriel as a booming voice echoes through the peaks. The announcement confirms that everyone has reached their designated starting points, signaling the official commencement of the trial. As the voice continues to broadcast the rules, the weight of the situation settles over the participants, including a focused Carta and a smirk-wearing Weiss. This is the joint 3-year exercise, a test designed to push every student to their absolute limit in a hostile environment. They brace themselves for the coming conflict, with Alan and Cheryl standing ready to face whatever challenges the mountain holds. With a final, thunderous declaration, the tag survival test officially begins, casting the students into a high-stakes game of strategy and strength. Far from the cold mountain peaks, a different kind of battle has just concluded on a sun-drenched shore. Milk Avitas stands over a defeated band of pirates, her blade pressed against the throat of their leader, who trembles in fear. She muses aloud about a task she had intended to complete recently, but the details escape her in the heat of the moment, leaving her momentarily distracted from her captive. Suddenly, the missing piece of her memory clicks into place with startling clarity. She exclaims in realization that her true purpose was to obtain a teaching license for the Noblesse Magic Academy, the very institution currently testing its students. An announcement echoes through the sky. The joint 3rd-year tag team, Survival, starts now. Below, at the edge of a vast forest, Weiss Vincent stands beside Alan, remarking that the main event has finally begun as a large bird circles overhead. The sprawling, mountainous forest terrain stretches out, a formidable arena for the participants. Deeper within the woods, a student cries out in agony as electrical energy surges around him. Nearby, Alan walks past the scene, seemingly unfazed by the commotion. He glances back at the ensnared student, whose face is contorted in pain. "What's wrong?" Alan asks, his expression unreadable. High above the trees, a large white bird lets out a sharp cry as it soars through the sky. This creature is identified as Vivid, student number 27, an underclassman participant in the event. The trap's work is complete. The student, identified as Ariel, and his partner are declared out of combat, lying defeated on the ground as Alan walks away. A soft glow envelopes the 2 fallen students, a magical transport sending them back to the Noblesse Magic Academy. His path is suddenly blocked by 2 other students. One, a dark-haired upperclassman, greets him with a soft, sinister laugh. The 2 upperclassmen reveal themselves as the architects of a trap. The grinning one fiddles with a small blade, remarking how foolish the others were to fall for it. His bespectacled companion agrees, stating that the underclassmen are simply too easy. The sinister upperclassman scoffs at Alan's presence, dismissing the rumor of an amazing new student as nothing special. His bespectacled partner, however, advises him not to underestimate the underclassmen. He laughs off the warning, remarking that all the truly famous students from their year have already been eliminated, and that the underclassmen's titles are just empty words. Alan walks past them, sword in hand, ignoring their chatter. As Alan moves on, the bespectacled upperclassman asks his partner for the name of a particular underclassman he's thinking of. His partner, a cruel grin spreading across his face, confirms the name is Weiss Vincent. Elsewhere in the forest, Weiss Vincent is indeed in the midst of combat, swiftly dispatching 2 other participants. The 2 trap setters watch from the shadows as Weiss lands his final blow with grim satisfaction. His opponent, identified as middleclassman number 10, Liddy, is declared out of combat. Weiss stands over the defeated student, his expression cold and victorious, as the 2 upperclassmen continue to observe. Suddenly, Weiss is knocked to the ground, looking up in shock from where he landed. He curses, demanding to know where his unseen assailant came from as a figure descends from the sky above him. From a distance, Alan observes the star on Weiss's shoulder, recognizing it as a mark of excellent achievement. He notes the small but high-density fire spell Weiss cast without chanting, acknowledging the upperclassman's strength. Realizing he can't hold back, Alan prepares for a serious fight. While falling, he creates an unnatural wall of solid magic beneath his feet, using it as a platform to halt his descent and regain his balance in midair. Watching this display, the sinister upperclassman who had been observing clenches his fist in rage. He screams for Weiss to burn to ashes, while Weiss himself, now back on the ground, places his hands on the earth. He dashes forward just as a massive explosion erupts from the ground where he just was. From his perch in a tree, Alan watches the spectacle, his eyes wide with surprise at the scale of the attack. He stares, utterly baffled. Just a moment ago, Weiss was plummeting towards the ground, but now he has inexplicably altered his trajectory in mid-flight. His disbelief turns to a shocked shout as he confirms what he saw. Weiss has indeed defied gravity, kicking off an unseen point in the air to launch himself forward. Propelled by this impossible maneuver, Weiss soars through a cloud of dust and debris from the earlier explosion. He lands with practiced ease, his sword held ready as he stands before a newly formed, translucent barrier of magic, an unnatural wall. This technique is a recent development, born from a frustrating failure. He recalls his training with Milk Avitas, where he was unable to master flight magic. Instead of giving up, he adapted, creating something entirely new. He gazes at the solid construct his magic has formed, a faint glimmer of pride in his eyes. He has given his unique creation a fitting name, Unnatural Wall. He continues to reflect on its application. Just as he demonstrated moments ago, he can manifest the wall in midair and use it as a solid foothold to push off from. The ability is not without its drawbacks, however. The wall only maintains its form for the brief moment he kicks off it. Furthermore, its magic consumption increases with altitude, preventing him from using it to fly to great heights. Despite these limitations, he knows it is more than enough. His tactical options have expanded dramatically, and he is genuinely glad he endured those difficult flying magic lessons. The new skill has already proven its worth. His moment of reflection is cut short as another student confronts him. A young man with a mohawk presses his sword against the unnatural wall, and under the focused pressure, cracks begin to spiderweb across its surface. As he focuses his attack on the barrier, his attention is violently diverted. A glowing projectile streaks down from the sky above, prompting a cry of confused alarm. "What the hell is this?" he shouts, staring upward in disbelief. He is suddenly struck by a powerful blast from his side, crying out in pain as the force sends him flying. Weiss, who had been preparing for a duel, looks on in surprise at the unexpected intervention. The blow leaves the Mohawk student incapacitated on the ground, officially declared out of combat. From a distance, a female voice calls out an apology to Weiss, who turns his head toward the sound. Weiss turns to see the one who intervened, a young woman identified as the flying mage girl, Cardaviol, hovering on an ornate staff. She explains that she had signaled another group was approaching, but since he didn't seem to notice, she took the initiative and attacked. He acknowledges her assistance, thanking her for the help. Internally, Weiss notes that she is quite skilled to take down an opponent in a single blow. Nearby, another student wonders aloud about the barrier Weiss had just used, while a shadowy figure observes the exchange. Carda continues her assessment of Weiss's abilities. She observes that his defensive magic, like his other techniques, is a high-performance blend of darkness and light, but she bets its efficiency is poor and it cannot be used many times. Her analysis is cut short by a new voice. A smug student with glasses appears, identifying Weiss as the top-ranked underclassman and confirming he was partnered with the student just defeated. He warns Weiss not to get cocky, declaring it is 100% impossible for him to win against the database attack. He makes a show of removing his glasses, dropping them to the ground. He strikes a dramatic pose, letting out a triumphant "huh," as an aura of power seems to emanate from him. He then reveals the source of his power. With a wild grin and strange markings now visible on his face, he boasts that when he takes off his glasses, his combat ability increases by 3.14 times, or to be exact, by the full, unending value of pi. Before the powered-up student can act, Weiss makes his move. Crouching low, he places a hand on the earth and unleashes a new technique, chanting "Dark Heal," as a wave of dark energy radiates outward. The dark energy immediately envelopes the student, who cries out in shock. He feels his strength draining away, wondering what kind of technique this is. He realizes with dawning horror that this kind of information was not in his data. He stared in disbelief, the dark energy sapping his strength. As Weiss Vincent closed the distance, the student could only scream that this unexpected power wasn't in his data, a desperate cry against an opponent who had just taunted him to do his research. The taunt was followed by a decisive blow. With a final, swift motion, Weiss struck his opponent down, the impact neutralizing him completely. His adversary defeated, Weiss turned with a wild, victorious grin, his point counter now displaying a staggering 7,014. He looked toward Cardaviol, who was perched on his floating sword, and declared with manic energy that they were going to continue their hunt, targeting any upperclassmen who let their guard down. As a result of their shared victory, Carda's own point total skyrocketed from a mere 22 to 1,336. The sudden surge of points left her wide-eyed, letting out a small shriek of shock. Meanwhile, far from that battle, Alan and Cheryl Elias walked together across a quiet, open field. The official results of the previous encounter were logged. Upperclassman number 96, Archimedes, was now out of combat. Their path was soon blocked by two other figures emerging from the trees. One of them, Cynthia Violetta, stepped forward and offered a polite good day, before confirming their identities, asking if they were indeed Alan and Cheryl. With introductions made, Cynthia's polite demeanor sharpened into one of challenge. Flanked by a determined-looking Lilith, she formally requested the honor of a match. The two heroines, showing growth and potential far beyond what was expected, had made their move. High above the forest, a large, white stork-like bird carrying a student is suddenly struck by a blast of energy from below, the impact echoing with a sharp thwack. The source of the attack is revealed to be Weiss Vincent, who lands with precision as his opponent. First-year student number 8, Myphis, is declared unable to continue. He stands over the fallen student in the clearing, clicking his tongue in slight irritation as the sound of his victory travels through the trees. Rejoining his partner, Carta Viole, Weiss observes that the second and third-year students seem to have completely stopped appearing. Carta confirms his suspicion, noting that none are in their immediate vicinity. A nearby magical bird offers an explanation, surmising that the upperclassmen have gone into hiding because the birds repeatedly announce every time a student is knocked out of the competition. With this new insight, Weiss takes to the sky, carrying Carta with him. He realizes it no longer matters where their targets attempt to run. Soaring high above the landscape on a platform of magic, he declares their new strategy. They will forget the first years and focus solely on hunting the second and third years. The plan clicks into place for Carta. Her eyes widen in sudden comprehension as she exclaims, "Got it!" Weiss's reasoning for their partnership becomes clear. He had teamed up with Carta specifically because of her special abilities. Her unique flying magic, a skill so difficult that even veteran mages struggle to control it, grants them an unparalleled aerial advantage to hunt down their hidden opponents. Her extraordinary detection ability was proving invaluable. Crouched low amidst the dense foliage, Weiss focused, a faint glow emanating from him as he tapped into her power. She, however, watched with growing concern, noting that their targets were exceptionally skilled at concealing their magical presence. With a worried expression, she identified a potential third-year student among them. Hearing her confirmation, Weiss didn't hesitate. He declared his intent to engage and immediately dove from their perch, while Carta gave a quiet acknowledgement. As he descended, his mind raced. He knew that, in a dense forest, an attack from directly overhead is difficult to defend against. Moreover, with the sky full of magical messenger birds, it would be harder for his target to recognize him as a human threat until it was too late. His strategy proved devastatingly effective. The unsuspecting upperclassman cried out as Weiss slammed into him from above, a brutal impact echoing through the trees. The strike was a perfect example of a core combat principle. Surprise attacks in this world are incredibly potent. Those caught unaware rarely have time to erect magical defenses, meaning a well-placed blow from a blind spot is almost guaranteed to be a one-shot victory. While Weiss executed his hunt, Carta remained vigilant, recalling her instructor Milk Sensei's constant nagging about always taking the first move. She asked Weiss how much time they had left, and he responded from a distance that it was about 20 minutes. Having regrouped, they checked their score, 2,070 points. Carta, seeing this substantial total, tried to reason with him, suggesting they had earned enough and there was no need for more risks. But Weiss was frantic, shouting at her to hurry and find the third-year students quickly. His outburst startled her. His face was a mask of desperate intensity as he leaned in, his voice booming as he roared that their current score was nowhere near enough. His eyes burned with a manic focus as he explained his reasoning. He reminded her that this points system came with special privileges, and the more points they earned, the greater the rewards would be. He stared at her, demanding she understand the stakes. He continues his explanation, laying out the privileges awarded by the Academy's ranking system. C rank, requiring 5,000 points, grants a private room. B rank, at 10,000 points, provides a luxurious private room. A rank, for 15,000 points, comes with a full tuition waiver. The ultimate S rank, at 20,000 points, allows a student to graduate early. Anyone with fewer than 5,000 points is relegated to a shared room. This system is particularly harsh because as first-year students advance, the total number of students in the upper grades drops significantly, increasing the concentration of powerful B and A rank individuals. And yet, in the entire, long history of the esteemed Noblesse Magic Academy, not a single student has ever managed to attain the legendary S rank. Processing this, Carta stares at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She hesitantly asks if he is truly aiming for that impossible rank by hunting down upperclassmen. Weiss simply offers a confident smirk. Her conclusion is shattered by his sudden, explosive roar. His face twists with manic energy as he bellows that what he's truly aiming for is B rank. He clarifies that while reaching S rank is, of course, his ultimate goal for the future, that isn't what's important at this moment. He presses her, asking if she understands the privileges that come with the B rank private room. Carta reels back in shock as he reveals the true, baffling prize he seeks. The B rank status includes room service with an all-you-can-eat supply of premium fruits. His mind flashes back to about a year ago. During those days of relentless, Spartan training, his only source of joy was the desserts served after each meal. He recalls how the training grew harsher and harsher until he gradually lost his sense of taste for fruit entirely. Then one day, the butler, Zeds, prepared something special for him. It was the ultimate delicacy, the object of his current obsession, a single, perfect slice of super premium melon. He was lost in the memory of that exquisite, hard-to-obtain mellow melon, an all-you-can-eat privilege granted only through B-rank room service. It was on that day, with that single, perfect taste, that he had finally regained what he had lost. That memory fueled his current resolve. He declared his plan aloud, To experience that flavor once more, he would rake in points from the upperclassmen during this very exam. Hearing his intense declaration, Carta stammered for a moment before steeling herself. She looked at him with wide, earnest eyes, agreeing that since she was helping him, she would of course see it through to the very end. He had her cooperation. As they continued onward, soaring above the forest, she reflected on his behavior. She had thought Weiss was unusually motivated for this exam, but she never would have guessed it was all because of food. A sudden thought struck her, connected directly to his obsession. Her own family actually grew melons on their farm. The realization brought a flush to her cheeks as she glanced at Weiss. She wondered to herself, if she were to tell him, would he come over to visit? Her private thoughts were violently interrupted as a colossal pillar of dark, ominous energy erupted from the forest below, shaking the very air around them. Both of them stared in shock at the sudden cataclysm, but Weiss's expression hardened with recognition. Carta, he said with grim certainty, even I can tell, that thing over there is a true monster. Carta's face was pale with terror. She realized with dawning horror that facing such a being was impossible. Weiss was out his depth. Despite her fear, Weiss acted decisively, shouting that they needed to get out of there quickly. But before he could finish, a brilliant light flared from the head of his staff, and he was suddenly cut off. The brilliant light from his staff subsides, and he lands with a heavy thud in a new location, a quiet forest clearing. He crouches low, arms outstretched, taking in the sudden change of scenery. His surprise gives way to a manic grin as he spots a new figure. He thinks to himself that things have just gotten interesting as he dashes forward. Carta, who is transported alongside him, watches in alarm, questioning why he is charging head-on at this new opponent. His target is a lone figure sitting serenely on a tree stump in the sun-dappled clearing. The person, possessing long, flowing hair, waits calmly as Weiss approaches, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The figure looks up, a sly smile playing on her lips. With a soft "ura," she identifies him, stating that he must be the rumored Weiss Vincent. She is Eva Everill, a second-year student. She stands with an air of relaxed confidence, a small bird perched on her finger as her long hair cascades over her shoulders. He grins wildly, pointing his sword directly at her. He formally greets her as Eva Everill Senpai and, without preamble, challenges her to a match. She chuckles softly, her amusement evident. She expresses her delight, stating it is an honor to receive a direct invitation from someone as famous as him. Her reputation is formidable. As she stands silhouetted against the light, it is known throughout the grounds that Eva Everill is the strongest student in the entire academy. This is precisely why he is so thrilled. In his mind, she is more than just a strong student. She is a game-breaking bug, an official cheater, and a true last boss of this world. Her immense power, as it was described in the original work he knows, was so overwhelming that she eventually grew bored with the mundane challenges of academy life. She is the strongest character, one no player has ever managed to defeat. Weiss knows that after this exam, she will leave the academy of her own accord. His hand clenches around the hilt of his sword, his resolve hardening. He realizes that with only 10 minutes remaining, this is his only chance to fight her. He decides to give it everything he has to defeat her and bring this exam to a close. Across from him, Eva watches with a confident, knowing smirk. With a ferocious cry, he charges forward, bringing his sword down in an all-out overhead strike aimed directly at Eva. Elsewhere, a sudden gust of wind sweeps through a forest clearing. Cheryl cries out in alarm as she witnesses Eva Everill and Cynthia Violetta standing over the defeated, collapsed form of Alan. From the ground, Alan looks up as Eva addresses him coolly, informing him that he is the only one left and asking him not to take their actions personally. Cynthia then adds to this, telling Alan to prepare himself. She explains that if they can defeat him, someone even Weiss couldn't completely beat, then Weiss will finally have to acknowledge their strength. A surge of raw power erupts from the fallen student. Alan's eyes snap open, his teeth gritted in fury as a powerful aura bursts forth, shocking both Eva and Cynthia as they witness his sudden awakening. On a field of scorched, broken stone, the lingering heat of battle radiates outwards. As an announcement declares the exam is over, Weiss Vincent walks away from his opponent, Eva Everill, who stands calmly amidst the devastation. Eva turns to him, noting that he was also holding back. She admits she didn't think he would force her to use magic, and, with a slight smile, concedes that he's not bad as their time runs out. In response, Weiss lets out a wild, unrestrained laugh. As his laughter echoes, a single, overwhelming thought crystallizes in Weiss's mind as he stares at his opponent. Eva Everill is unbelievably strong. He internally recounts the fight, realizing he had played every card in his hand, deploying his absolute barrier, dark eye, and dark heal techniques, and yet, not a single thing had worked on her. The memory of his utter defeat flashes in his mind. Him, brought to his knees amidst the shattered remnants of his own power, while she stood above, completely untouched. Catching his breath, Weiss watches her distant figure and admits to himself that he had been growing bored of the academy. His face, slick with sweat, twists into a look of intense determination. He had planned to quit after this exam, but now, everything has changed. Sensing his stare, Eva glances back over her shoulder, a confident and knowing smile on her lips. I've taken a liking to you, she tells him. Her words ignite a fire within him. A wide, almost manic grin spreads across his face as he makes a new resolution. He will stick around this academy a little longer. High above the training grounds, the instructor Carta Viol hovers on her staff, her voice carrying across the area as she formally addresses all students, bringing the event to a close. Eva Everil observes as Weiss Vincent, despite his loss, offers a confident grin. An announcement is made. He will now be sent back to the Noblesse Magic Academy. In an instant, with a great whoosh of magical energy, he vanishes from the rocky terrain of the exam grounds. He reflects on the outcome, realizing that once again, he has made a major change to the scenario he was supposed to know. His actions had far-reaching consequences. Eva Everil remained at the academy, and Carta Viol, clutching her weapon with pure joy, had avoided expulsion. Back at the academy, amidst the chatter of other returning students, his attention is drawn to two figures, Cynthia and Lilith. He stares in shock as he sees them. Cynthia and Lilith were defeated. Lilith supports a battered Cynthia, whose uniform is torn and frayed. He cannot comprehend it, wondering who on earth could have possibly done this to them. As they walk away from the crowd, Cynthia's face is a mask of regret. She turns to her maid and whispers an apology. She confesses that their defeat is the result of her own arrogance, admitting she got carried away with the belief that she had grown stronger. Her shame deepens as she continues, lamenting that on top of everything, she dragged Lilith in his suffering alongside her. Lilith, however, immediately refutes the apology. She insists that she is the one at fault, blaming her own weakness for tarnishing Cynthia's battle record. Cynthia looks back at her, a trickle of blood on her lip, her expression a mix of pain and surprise. Her gaze remains fixed on Weiss as she confesses her true desire. I wanted to win, she admits, her voice filled with regret. Her confession hangs in the air, and Weiss's eyes widen in shock as she specifies her target, against Alan. The scene flashes back to the moment of their defeat. Alan stood victorious, while Cynthia knelt on the ground before him. From a distance, Weiss could only watch, his expression one of utter disbelief. Alan, though weary and marked by the fight, looked down upon the defeated Cynthia. Her own face was slick with sweat, her usual confidence completely gone. His victory secured, Alan's attention suddenly snaps elsewhere. He turns to see Weiss standing a short distance away, his face a mask of shock and dismay. For a moment, the two rivals lock gazes. Alan's expression is one of hard-won victory, while Weiss's face twists into a grimace of resentment and frustration. With that silent confrontation, the joint 3-year tag team exam officially concluded. Pillars of light enveloped the remaining students, signaling their return from the examination grounds. Once again, the students were returned to the familiar grounds of the Noblesse Magic Academy, and the routine of their school life resumed. For Weiss, the aftermath of the exam brought a significant change. He was promoted to B rank, a status that afforded him a life of considerable luxury within the academy. It seemed, for a time, that these peaceful days would continue. Yet, the daily routine of constant competition against lower-ranked students began to feel hollow and unsatisfying as the victories came too easily. His new life as a B-rank student continued, bringing him to another lecture. Inside the classroom, Instructor Chloe stood before the students as a door rattled open. She began to announce the arrival of a guest instructor, but was interrupted by a voice from the doorway offering a polite greeting. Chloe paused, seemingly resigned to the interruption. The students' reactions to the newcomer were immediate. One young man, with a headband, trembled with excitement, openly commenting on her appearance. Nearby, Carta Viol gasped in surprise, while Eva Everil looked on with wide eyes. But amidst the varied responses, Weiss's own was one of pure, unadulterated shock. His shock quickly morphed into a visceral, overwhelming sensation. Sweat beaded on his brow as a dark memory or feeling surged within him. He realized with dawning horror that his vision was gradually turning red. In a classroom, a woman with long, dark, wavy hair stands before a group of students. She introduces herself as Milk Avidas, announcing that she will be in charge of their combat training starting today. After her introduction, she asks if there are any questions. Weiss Vincent, panting and clutching his chest as if from a recent exertion, emphatically raises his hand. Milk glares at him with a menacing intensity. Before he can speak, another student, the large-framed Duke Billion, rises to ask why Milk Sensei has come to the academy as a substitute. Weiss lets out a relieved smile, silently thanking Duke for asking the very question that was on his own mind. The question hangs in the air, and Milk's face is cast in shadow, her expression unreadable but radiating annoyance. Weiss internally repeats the question, desperately wanting to know why she is there. Her response is sharp and immediate. She commands him to shut up, dismissing his query as a pointless question. Her hostile dismissal enrages Weiss, who grits his teeth and fumes, wondering what is wrong with the woman. As his anger simmers, another woman, Academy Instructor Chloe, steps in. She begins to explain that the reason Miss Milk has joined them is because the Academy is currently short on instructors. She elaborates, revealing that since the tag test a few days prior, A large number of upperclassmen have been requesting extra combat training outside of their normal classes. Chloe concludes that the upperclassmen are all fired up, determined not to be looked down upon by the underclassmen. This surge in demand necessitated hiring additional instructors, leading to Milk A. Vitas' appointment. Weiss listens, his expression hardening with understanding. He hears his name, Weiss, spoken with chilling clarity. Milk A. Vitas stares at him, remarking that bringing her to the academy was the biggest mistake he could have made. Her presence becomes menacing, a dark aura flaring around her as she correctly guesses he is thinking something unnecessary. Weiss flinches, shocked by her perception. His composure shatters. He frantically denies it, claiming he was just zoned out, all while his mind reels, wondering how she could possibly know. Milk simply replies, I see, her calm demeanor unnerving him further. Her gaze shifts to a nearby mountain peak. Without missing a beat, she announces his punishment, push-ups. As he struggles through the exercise, sweat beading on his brow, Milk watches from a distance. She comments that it has been a while, and that he seems to have improved slightly over the past few months. A cruel smirk plays on her lips. The thought consumes him. She couldn't have come to this academy just to bully him, could she? While he wrestles with this suspicion, his fellow students watch in disbelief. They murmur amongst themselves, shocked that Weiss is actually listening to a teacher for once. Their chatter is cut short as Milk appears before them on the path. With utter disdain, she yells at the jogging students, questioning if they call their pathetic pace running. A predatory smile spreads across her face as she surveys the struggling group. She concludes to herself that this academy is filled with nothing but spoiled brats. Having made her judgment, she issues a new, sweeping order to all of them. They're to keep climbing the mountain until sunset. The command is met with a collective cry of despair. She stood with a smug smile, informing Weiss that his task was even more impossible than he thought. He was to climb the mountain while continuously doing push-ups. With her arrival, the combat training class had transformed from a difficult trial into a hell within hell, a fact reflected in the terrified expressions of students like Cardaviol. Because of this, whenever a training day approached, every student, from the intense Alan to the stoic muscular student, trembled in absolute fear of what was to come. On this day, however, the students learned that even the most brutal of deserts can have an oasis. The male students were gathered not on a torturous mountain, but beside a large, pristine swimming pool. They stood shirtless in their swim trunks, whispering in confusion. Weiss wondered aloud why there was a pool, while another student questioned what their instructor could possibly be planning now. Their murmuring was cut short when one of them shouted for the others to look. At the far end of the pool, a group of female students had appeared, led by Cynthia Violetta, who offered a casual apology for keeping the boys waiting. As the male students stared in stunned silence at the girls now clad in swimsuits, Milk A. Vitas' voice boomed, announcing that the day's activity would be water training. The silence shattered as the male students erupted in a euphoric roar, celebrating their unexpected good fortune. Watching the chaotic joy, Alan and Carda looked on with clear annoyance, while Eva Everell muttered with contempt about the stupid brats. On a floating platform, Weiss Vincent skillfully balances on a spinning log. From the crowd of students watching by the pool, Duke roars with approval, impressed by Weiss's performance. He achieves this remarkable feat by precisely adjusting his balance, using the log itself as an extension of his will. This precise control allows him to manipulate the movements of his female opponents on the other end, causing their swimsuits to be pulled up and down against their will. The girls are caught completely off guard, flustered and exposed by the unexpected tactic. Watching from the sidelines, Duke and another muscular student are in awe. They marvel at the display, calling it a godlike technique and acknowledging the power of the top-ranked first year. As the competition continues, another challenger is swiftly knocked into the water with a great splash. On the platform, Eva Everell dispatches her own opponent with contemptuous ease. Drenched in sweat, Weiss wipes his brow, exhausted but pleased. The male students cheer for him, shouting that he was amazing and thanking him for the spectacle. He turns back to the crowd with a smirk, asking who's next. In stark contrast, Cynthia, Carda, and the other girls look on with utter disgust, muttering that Weiss is a scumbag and that boys are the worst. From the poolside mist, a figure emerges, holding a large, spiked club. It is Eva Everell. Weiss's confident expression vanishes, replaced by a dark, shadowed look of dread as she calmly states, "It's me." His confidence shatters instantly. He pleads for a moment to rest, internally screaming that he is sick and tired of this same, grueling punchline repeating itself. His chaotic log-rolling match with Eva Everell ended with a massive splash, sending both of them and several other students tumbling into the water. After that incident, the Academy's water training was never conducted again. The instructors had become fed up with the boys' antics. Sometime later, in the grand dining hall, Cardaviol sat alone at a long table, a solitary figure among her peers. As she ate quietly, a tray laden with food was suddenly placed on the table before her. Carda looked up, startled, to find Eva Everell standing there, prompting a nearby student to exclaim in recognition. From a short distance, Eva's companions observed the interaction. One noted that Carda was eating by herself, as usual, while the other remarked that she didn't seem to join Weiss's group for meals. Eva explained her reasoning, suggesting that with Cynthia now with Weiss, Carta would likely feel out of place if she tried to join them. Her friends chuckled in agreement. The observation struck a chord with Carta. She reflected on the recent past, realizing that she and Weiss had only been partners for the duration of the tag team event. Eva then leaned closer, her tone shifting. She told Carta to be sure to thank Weiss properly, reminding her that the only reason she avoided expulsion was because she had leached off his strength. The sudden hostility drew the attention of Eva's companions. One of them glared towards Carta, sharply questioning the look in her eyes. Eva's expression turned to one of pure contempt. She called Carta a damn parasite, sneering that while her only skill was flying, she managed to cling to the academy by leeching off someone stronger. Her two friends joined in the verbal assault, leaning forward menacingly. They warned Carta to be ready, declaring that without Weiss by her side, they would get her expelled in no time. Stunned into silence, Carta could only watch as Eva and her companions turned and walked away, leaving her alone and shaken by their cruel words. She is confronted by Eva Everill, who leans forward with a chilling smile, extending a seemingly polite invitation to eat with her and her blonde-haired companion. The girl's face contorts in terror. A single thought crystallizes in her mind. One problem has vanished, only for a new, more menacing one to appear in its place. Before she can react, the blonde companion speaks, informing a startled Carta that she has reconsidered her opinion of her. Carta can only manage a confused sound in response. She elaborates, referencing the recent joint tag team exam. The companion recounts that, apparently, Carta and Weiss worked together to defeat 24 students, a group that included formidable second and third years. In response, Carta hastily clarifies that Weiss accomplished that feat entirely on his own. The blonde companion remarks that it's a record-breaking number and not bad at all. Her tone shifts, however, as she voices skepticism, stating that she doesn't believe even someone as skilled as Weiss could have achieved that result alone. She explains her reasoning, admitting that even if her own group had allied with Weiss, they couldn't have matched that score. The companion directly credits Carta's flight magic and impressive abilities for making that outcome possible. Visibly moved by the unexpected praise, Carta blushes. The blonde companion then confesses her own frustration, admitting her team was completely defeated before asking Carta to please continue looking after Weiss from now on. The sudden shift in demeanor catches Carta completely off guard. The blonde companion's friendly facade drops, and she aggressively demands to know why Carta has been avoiding them, insisting they've wanted to talk for a long time. Flustered, Carta can only stammer in response. Ignoring her confusion, the blonde companion, now flanked by Eva and their other associate, delivers a final, chilling proposition. She tells Carta that from now on, they should all get along together with Weiss. The words hang in the air as a clear and unsettling threat. Her eyes welled with tears, but she forced a faint, trembling smile, murmuring her assent to their demands. Satisfied, Eva Everill settled at a table with her companions, cheerfully suggesting they eat while the food was still warm. Her pleasantries were cut short when her dark-haired associate cried out in confusion, demanding to know why their pot au feu was completely frozen solid. As they stared at the inexplicably cold meal, the blonde companion's thoughts turned elsewhere, asking about Weiss's whereabouts. With a downcast expression, Carta began to explain his absence. Her mind flashed back to an earlier time. Weiss, covered from head to toe in bandages, lay helpless in bed and asked if she would heal him. She had playfully refused with a simple, smiling nope. That moment was a direct result of the training she had undergone with him. It had empowered her to confront the bullies who had tormented her during the exam, giving them a taste of their own medicine and ultimately causing their expulsion from the academy. A young Alan stares in wide-eyed horror, the words "no way" escaping his lips as he witnesses his hometown engulfed in flames. The roar of the inferno fills the air as the place he once knew is reduced to rubble and ash. On that fateful day, he lost everything. A hand, trembling and scorched, reaches for a shattered picture frame amidst the debris, a portrait of a smiling family. Now, just a broken memory consumed by the blaze. In the time that followed, living a simple life in a rustic cabin, a new possibility was presented to him. While a companion tended to a roasting meal, the young man inquired about a place called the Noblesse Magic Academy. He listened intently, sweat beading on his brow as the implications settled in. He asked with desperate hope if graduating from such an institution could truly grant him the title of a noble. His friend, Cheryl Elias, confirmed his hopes with a calm and informative expression. She explained that graduates of the academy are said to gain authority equal to that of the nobility. She elaborated further, explaining that even a commoner, once graduated, could gain access to dungeons all over the world. Furthermore, the prestige of the academy would make traveling between countries significantly easier. As the aroma of roasting meat filled the air, their companion chimed in, a grin spreading across his face as he prepared to summarize the point. In other words, he began, he could use his own hands to wipe out the very monsters that stole his family and his hometown. The thought consumes the now older Alan, his form cast in shadow, his eyes burning with a singular, vengeful purpose, his resolve hardening. He turned to Cheryl, who watched him with concern. "I've decided," he stated, his voice firm. He looked forward, his expression a mask of pure determination. "I will," he declared, "take the entrance exam for Noblesse Academy." He recalls the time after his decision. With the help of Cheryl and Master Darius, he trained relentlessly, preparing for the Academy's entrance exam. After all that, his exam results were a complete disaster. He lay defeated on the rain-slicked ground, utterly broken. The one responsible was Weiss Vincent. Alan remembers him as terrifyingly strong, a wide, unsettling grin plastered on his face even in the downpour. And yet, despite being so certain he had failed, he was shocked to discover that for some unknown reason, he had passed the exam. He joined the ranks of the other successful candidates, but the joy of his unexpected success was short-lived. This was because after enrollment, the Academy's point system nearly caused him to fail repeatedly. Weiss, the very person who had crushed him, targeted him relentlessly, mocking him as perfect for point farming, an easy target like a slime. Pushed to his limit, Alan finally snapped. He had had enough. He roared his refusal to continue living a life where everything was taken from him. In that moment of defiance, a realization dawned on him. Before he knew it, it seemed Weiss was always watching him, his presence a constant shadow. This constant observation sparked a question in his mind. Did Weiss, the top-ranked first year, see him as someone worthy of fighting? Did he recognize his strength? Alan realized he felt the same way. He wanted to fight Weiss again. That desire solidified into a new resolve. He vowed to catch up to Weiss. This time, he would win and keep on winning. His face, though bruised and marked by a trickle of blood, was set in a mask of pure defiance. He roared Weiss's name, making a solemn vow for all to hear. "I'll defeat you, just watch." The declaration hung in the air, fueled by a surge of raw, unadulterated fury. His features twisted into a snarl, his teeth gritted in a display of sheer, impotent rage at his own weakness. His outburst, however, did little to faze its target. Weiss stood impassively, his gaze distant and dismissive as another student struggled to hold Alan back. A low murmur spread through the onlookers as Instructor Darius watched the confrontation unfold. As Alan continued to shout his rival's name, his voice raw with frustration, Weiss finally responded. His words were not a counter-challenge, but a cold, cutting dismissal. "I expected more from you." In a wide academy hallway, Alan steps forward, his voice sharp as he calls out to his rival Weiss. His face twists into a mask of fury as he bellows the words he's been holding back. "I really hate you." In stark contrast to Alan's outburst, a slow, predatory grin spreads across Weiss's face. He replies with chilling calm. The feeling's mutual. The two turn and walk in opposite directions down the long corridor, Weiss casually adding, "Don't worry." From a distance, Cheryl, Elias, and another student watched them part, wondering what the heated argument was about. Later, in a vast, empty training courtyard, Weiss channels his frustration into his practice, spinning alone with his sword. He moves with relentless intensity, his blade a silver arc as he executes a flurry of powerful swings, pushing his body to its limits. From a balcony overlooking the courtyard, Milk Avitas watches him with a knowing smirk. "Working hard, aren't you, Weiss?" she remarks to herself, drenched in sweat. Weiss looks up and addresses his instructor. He confesses that he can't clear his mind of distracting thoughts, and she correctly intuits their source, asking if this is about Alan. Meanwhile, Instructor Chloe speaks with Instructor Darius. She confirms what she's heard from him, stating, "You two don't seem to be getting along." Weiss's mind flashes back to their history class, the memory fueling his irritation. He thinks to himself that Alan is too soft, and that very fact is what infuriates him the most. The lesson began with a stark image, the shackled feet of a slave, a heavy iron ball chained to their ankles. It was a brutal illustration of how this country treats its slaves and demi-humans. This lesson was part of a lecture delivered by Weiss to his classmates. He explained that most slaves are the children of poor families. He continued, outlining a grim cycle. Born to irresponsible parents with no money and given little education, they are left with few options but to commit crimes or die in the gutters. The slave system, he argued, was established as a way to control such people. It was then that Alan voiced his own, starkly different opinion. With a firm gaze, he declared his belief that the slave system is not necessarily evil. His eyes were wide and intense, broadcasting the unwavering conviction behind his shocking statement. The memory of this classroom confrontation gives way to its immediate aftermath in the hallway. Enraged, Weiss grabbed Alan by the collar, his fury palpable. He recalled Alan's earlier declaration that slavery is evil, a statement Weiss now intended to report. This was what he needed to tell someone. This entire incident was what Weiss recounted to his father, Akujoku Vincent. He explained that Alan, a person who almost never shows emotion, had not only condemned slavery, but had even gone so far as to say that nobles themselves are unnecessary. But Weiss was not the only noble left reeling. Elsewhere, Cynthia Violetta clenched her fist, her expression a mask of frustration. She recalled how Alan had said this in front of a crowd of nobles, and she was certain she wasn't the only one shocked. His naive way of speaking was infuriating. She continued her silent critique, arms crossed. To her, Alan spoke as if simply avoiding conflict was a solution, offering no real plan. It was no different from empty preaching, like someone just saying war is bad, and nothing else. She dismisses Alan's ideals as utter nonsense. To her, people are driven by fundamental desires like sleep, food, and conflict. She scoffs at his simplistic solution for war orphans, that those who can should help, viewing his lofty words as meaningless. Her thoughts are interrupted by a sharp sound. Weiss, standing before her, asks if she is listening, snapping her back to the present. Startled, she confirms she was distracted. Elsewhere, Milk Avitas reflects on the same incident. She reveals a critical piece of information. Alan grew up in an orphanage. She muses that Weiss's words may have affected him more deeply than anyone realized. She turns her attention to Weiss, noting that while she understands Alan's anger, she was surprised Weiss himself got so worked up over a classroom debate. She then poses a direct question. Was his intense reaction because his opponent was Alan? Weiss is visibly taken aback. The question triggers a realization within him. A memory of his own irrational anger flashes in his mind, and he understands. It was something more than just a simple disagreement. Seeing his reaction, Milk presses further, her gaze sharp and unwavering. Weiss, she asks, do you really hate Alan that much? The question strikes him with the force of a physical blow. As Weiss stands frozen by the inquiry, Milk turns and begins to walk away, remarking that clashing opinions isn't inherently a bad thing. She continues, however, that once one becomes an adult, such open conflict is often not permitted. Gripping the hilt of her sword, she turns back to face him in a training yard. Brace yourself, Weiss, she commands. In response, Weiss charges forward, his blade meeting Milk's in a violent clash of steel that sends sparks flying across the moonlit courtyard. The Noblesse Magic Academy's training combat uniform is a specialized piece of equipment. It activates upon taking damage, but only when the wearer is inside a magic circle prepared in advance. In exchange for this protection, it reduces injury and pain by draining a significant amount of a user's magic power. Thanks to these uniforms, students can fight each other seriously while remaining safe. This system has allowed the Noblesse Magic Academy to produce many individuals who overwhelmingly surpass those of other academies. However, within the grand halls of the academy, a new lesson is about to begin. Instructor Darius addresses his class with a grave warning. He explains that in this world, there exist opponents against whom these advanced uniforms are completely useless. He looks over the classroom, filled with students like Weiss, Alan, and Cynthia, and identifies these terrifying foes. They are monsters, he declares. His declaration sets the stage for their next assignment. And tomorrow's exercise will be a survival exercise in the northern Gariel Mountains, where monsters live. As the students absorb the news, Eva Everill leans toward Aura, noting that while it is possible to withdraw, there is a consequence. Unfortunately, she says with a knowing look, it'll also affect your grades. Following this warning, Instructor Darius presents a sign-up sheet on his desk. Those who are prepared, he commands, sign here. A student with light hair steps forward, ready to accept the challenge. The instructor watches as Weiss Vincent steps forward without hesitation. He dips a quill into an inkwell and firmly signs his name on the participation sheet for the survival exercise, while other students, including Aura and Cynthia, look on from their desks. His decisive action draws the immediate attention of Alan and Aura, who watch with expressions of tense surprise. After completing the registration, Weiss turns and walks away from the instructor's desk, his part in the proceedings seemingly finished. He stops directly in front of Alan and Aura. With a cool, challenging gaze, he suggests that they should withdraw from the exercise. The provocation instantly ignites Alan's temper. His eyes narrow as he slams both hands on the desk, shouting back that there is no way he will withdraw. Weiss remains completely unfazed by the outburst, stating dismissively that he just felt like saying it. His casual response leaves Aura baffled, and she stands up abruptly, demanding to know what this is all about. Without another word, he turns his back on them. Alan watches him go, muttering under his breath about what could possibly be wrong with him. Following the tense exchange, the rest of the students, including a still annoyed Alan and a concerned Aura, proceed to sign the participation sheet one by one. Instructor Darius looks over the now full list, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. He notes with a mix of relief and apprehension that everyone is participating, offering a quiet word of thanks. Elsewhere, Weiss stares forward with grim intensity. He internally acknowledges that the event is finally starting and, in a rare moment of solidarity, wishes everyone the best of luck for what is to come tomorrow. He understood that all the training up to this point had merely been a warm-up. The real game was only just beginning. As a fierce wind howled, he reflected on the grim truth. From this point on, failure would mean more than just expulsion. The Academy's system, which weeded out the incapable early, was a mercy, as it reduced the number of students who would otherwise face pointless deaths. His thoughts were cut short as the students found themselves in a vast, snow-covered wilderness. Before them, Instructor Darius's voice boomed, announcing that the death game was starting now. The instructor's face was stern as he specified the first condition of the exercise. Its duration would be 3 days. He gestured towards the bleak, snow-laden trees surrounding them. instructing the students to form pairs and survive within the forest. He then reiterated the warning he had given them the day before. The forest was home to a large, unspecified number of monsters. Addressing the assembled students, Darius stressed that survival was their top priority. However, he added, any pair that managed to defeat monsters would be awarded points. As the rules were laid out, Weiss spotted another instructor, identifying her as Chloe Sensei. Nearby, Alan asked who she was. Just then, Chloe, now wearing large protective goggles, advised Cynthia to remove her earrings, explaining it was a common-sense precaution against frostbite, just as she had removed her own glasses. While the others prepared, Weiss's attention turned to the sky as snow began to fall more heavily. He recognized this as the worst-case scenario, a blizzard. He recalled that even in the original game, the weather had always been an unpredictable variable. This complication, combined with his inherent revulsion for the entire event, soured his expression. The whole situation was utterly sickening. Within a snow-covered forest, Cynthia Violetta walks ahead of Weiss Vincent, her thoughts turning to the original story. She contemplates what is supposed to happen during this particular training exercise, her expression hidden as she trudges through the deep snow. The woods are silent, the bare, snow-laden branches of the trees creating a stark, quiet landscape under a gray sky. That silence is shattered as the snow erupts, a flurry of white shapes bursting from beneath the surface with startling speed. Reacting instantly, Cynthia whirls around and shouts a warning. Weiss, it's headed your way. A white blur rockets through the air directly toward him. He turns to face the threat, his expression utterly calm and focused. Yeah, he responds, his voice steady as he assesses the situation. His gloved hand tightens on the hilt of his sword, already anticipating the attack. He knows precisely what is coming. As the creature bursts from the snow, his perception sharpens. He activates his ability, Dark Eye, his pupil constricting to a fine point as he locks onto the fast-moving target. The threat is revealed. A swarm of vicious, white rabbit-like monsters with glowing red eyes and sharp fangs. They screech as they leap to attack, but a wild, predatory grin spreads across Weiss's face as he draws his blade. He surges forward, his sword a blur of motion as he effortlessly cuts down the monstrous creatures. From a distance, partially hidden by the trees, Alan watches the display unfold. Elsewhere, another student with a headband intercepts one of the rabbits, roaring as he smashes it with a powerful barehanded strike. The student with the headband fought with raw fury, sending a snow rabbit flying with a powerful kick, even as another of the creatures overwhelmed a different, fallen classmate. Observing the frantic battle from a distance, Weiss Vincent let out a half-hearted battle cry of his own. His bored expression and the thought of how scary it all was revealed his complete disinterest. His minimal effort was of no consequence. Points were being steadily awarded to the Weiss-Duke pair, who were clearly dominating their section of the forest with ruthless efficiency. Elsewhere, Alan contemplated the unexpected team compositions, briefly noting to himself that he had somehow been paired with Duke. Shaking off the thought, he decided it was time to move on. Duke, the eldest son of a knightly family, was a formidable fighter who specialized in body enhancement magic. This was a stark contrast to the struggling student with a headband, whose borrowed uniform was straining at the seams. As he walked, Alan continued to analyze the situation. He recalled that in the original story he knew, Weiss had not been paired with Duke, confirming his suspicion that events were deviating from their expected course. He couldn't discern the criteria the instructors used to decide the pairs. In a survival situation where stamina was paramount, the choices seemed illogical. He then glanced over at his actual partner, the student with the headband. A sudden realization struck him. This muscle head, as he thought of him, was a jackpot. His partner, however, was far less strategic in his thinking. He complained that they hadn't eaten all day and pleaded for a break, reminding Alan that the test lasted 3 days and that securing food and shelter was part of the objective. He then looked at Alan, utterly perplexed. If survival was the goal, he asked, why were they hunting monsters like crazy? To him, their priorities seemed completely backward. The student, still trying to comprehend his partner's logic, could only utter a confused, huh? In response, Alan, with his back still turned, stated plainly, we're not eating. He then turned, his eyes burning with an unnerving intensity as he laid out his radical strategy. For the next 3 days, he declared, they would hunt monsters without sleep or rest. The declaration struck his partner with the force of a physical blow. His face contorted in utter disbelief, sweat breaking out on his brow as he let out an incredulous roar of what? 3 men, the captors, assess their prize. They recognize her immediately, murmuring amongst themselves that she is indeed the child of the esteemed Elias family. As they speak, the girl, Cheryl, reflects on her identity. She realizes with a pang of sadness that ever since she was young, no one has ever called her by her first name, Shirley. Her bleak thoughts are interrupted by the reality of her surroundings. A dilapidated wooden shack hidden deep within a forest, with one of her kidnappers standing guard outside. Inside, the scene is just as grim. 2 of the men stand over her as she remains bound to a central pillar, one of them letting out a cruel laugh. One of the captors remarks on her composure, noting it is just as expected of a noble. He then states her value, revealing that the ransom for this brat is 10 million pel. He continues to taunt her, sneering that she should be glad she's from the Elias family, as it's the only reason she's worth anything. Her eyes widen with a defiant glare. Unseen by the kidnappers, someone else approaches. The crunch of boots on grass is followed by a glimpse of a determined eye, fixed on the goal ahead. At the edge of the clearing, Alan comes to a stop. He observes the guards standing watch outside the shack, his presence still a secret. Suddenly, chaos erupts inside. One of the kidnappers cries out as he is struck down, while his partner shouts in disbelief, "What? A kid?" He stands in the doorway, a silhouette against the bright light from outside. With one captor already defeated at his feet, Alan calmly faces the remaining man. As the confrontation begins, the bound Cheryl desperately tries to de-escalate. She shouts for a timeout, pleading that she is completely defenseless and that they should calm down to talk. Her plea is cut short by a sharp cry of pain from her captor. Her eyes widen in shock, and she lets out a terrified scream as the violence erupts before her. The source of the sound is Alan, who moves with swift precision, delivering a powerful kick to the face of the remaining kidnapper. The man is thrown back, joining his accomplice in unconsciousness on the floor. With the threat neutralized, he stands over the defeated thugs, sword in hand. He then turns his attention to the captive girl tied to the pillar and formally introduces himself, stating, "My name is Alan." Looking down at her, he makes a declaration, "I came to save you, Shirley." The use of this unfamiliar name makes Cheryl look up, her expression a mixture of confusion and surprise. For Cheryl, hearing that name feels as if time itself, long since stopped, has begun to move forward once more. The memory of that day, the day everything started, begins to surface. Her mind flashes back. It was the first time that she and Alan had ever met. She recalls his history. Alan was a commoner, raised in an orphanage, who held a powerful dream: to make the world equal for everyone. In her memory, she sees him speaking of an equal society without class differences, a world with no nobles, commoners, or slaves. At the time, she could only think that such a thing was impossible. Elsewhere, as he walks with his attendants, Weiss Vincent finds himself contemplating Alan's ideology. He is aware, he realizes, that the ideals Alan speaks of are not just empty talk. There is a genuine conviction behind them. The narrative shifts to a memory. A young Alan stands before the captain of the Royal Knights, Zevis Aldine. The stern captain dismisses the boy as a persistent brat, but Alan is undeterred, vowing to prove his worth through his actions. Following this vow, Alan begged Captain Zevis to train him. His persistence paid off, and he began his training under the captain's watchful eye. The memory is revealed to be from Cheryl's perspective. She recalls that when she was young, she shared Alan's longing for a world of equality. However, she felt that, unlike him, she couldn't express this conviction through her actions. Her admiration for his unwavering spirit grew until, before she knew it, she had fallen for him. This inspired a new desire within her. She wanted to become like him, too. After that time, she and Alan, along with another boy they had somehow ended up with, stood together, united in purpose. As a first step toward achieving their goal, the trio decided to enroll in the prestigious Noblesse Magic Academy. But the memory takes a dark turn. Cheryl's face contorts in horror as she recalls what happened next, the sound of falling rain echoing the dread of the moment. The scene flashes to the brutal reality of the entrance exams. Weiss Vincent strikes Alan down with overwhelming force. From the sidelines, Cheryl can only scream Alan's name as he is left bloodied and broken. In the pouring rain, Weiss walks away from his defeated opponent. The one they met there, Cheryl remembers, was an infamous man known to all. Weiss Vincent. During the exams, he had used his immense talent and power to do whatever he pleased, beating Alan unnecessarily and with cruel satisfaction. A malicious grin etched on his face. Within the academy halls, a group of students discusses Weiss Vincent's recent achievements. One girl shares rumors that he used dirty tricks to dominate the top spot in grades, even alleging he used another student, Carta, as a shield to ambush seniors during the tag exam. As the gossip circulates, Alan, Cheryl, and another student walk by. Alan stops abruptly, his expression hardening as he overhears the slander being spoken about his rival. He turns to Cheryl, dismissing the claims outright. He insists that can't be true, stating that Weiss would never resort to such dirty tricks. Alan concedes that he and Weiss do not get along, but he firmly believes his rival's strength was built through genuine effort. His certainty is absolute. As an image of Weiss's determined face flashes through his mind, Alan declares that Weiss has conviction. He knows this, he explains, because he has fought him. Standing beside a worried Cheryl, Alan's thoughts turn inward. He doesn't think she understands. He reflects that Alan, referring to himself, simply doesn't know the true ugliness of the nobility. Cheryl looks down, her expression troubled and uncertain.